On the rain-soaked rooftop terrace of Sterling Dynamics, 30 floors above Seattle, Vivian Sterling stands at the edge with her heels inches from empty air. Behind her, Damien Voss, the man the world believes built this empire, steps closer through the storm. "You think anyone will believe you?" he says quietly. "You're just the broken girl who hides in server rooms." The wind tears at her clothes. Her fingers grip the railing. And then, suddenly, the metal is gone and she's falling, until a hand catches her wrist and pulls her back from nothing. If you want to see how a woman takes back everything stolen from her, stay until the end. Hit that like button and comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. The security footage would later show exactly 4 seconds between the moment Vivian Sterling's hand slipped off the wet railing and the moment Ethan Ryder's arm locked around her waist. 4 seconds during which her body tilted backward over 60 stories of empty Seattle air. 4 seconds during which Damien Voss stood perfectly still in his $1,500 suit, watching. But that came later. The beginning, the real beginning, started 3 hours earlier, in the executive conference room where Vivian sat invisible at the far end of the table, while Damien presented her work to a room full of investors who didn't know she existed. The Sterling AI platform represents a fundamental breakthrough in adaptive learning systems, Damien said, his voice smooth as polished stone. On the screen behind him, lines of code scrolled past. Code Vivian had written during 18-hour nights in the sub-level server room where nobody bothered her. "We're projecting market penetration across 7 industries within the next fiscal quarter." Vivian's fingers tightened around the pen in her lap. She didn't take notes. She'd stopped taking notes 2 years ago when she realized nobody ever asked for her input anyway. Instead, she watched the way Damien's hand moved across the presentation remote, the way his smile never quite reached his eyes, the way he pronounced "we" like he'd personally written every algorithm himself. "Miss Sterling." She looked up. Martin Chen, the lead investor from Cascade Capital, was staring at her with polite confusion. "I'm sorry, I didn't catch your role in all this?" Damien answered before she could open her mouth. "Vivian heads our internal development team. She keeps the engine running while we focus on the road ahead." He smiled at her across the table. "Isn't that right?" It wasn't a question. It was a reminder, a warning wrapped in professional courtesy. "That's right," Vivian heard herself say. Her voice came out smaller than she intended. She hated how small it sounded. The meeting continued. Damien fielded questions about processing speeds and neural network architecture with the easy confidence of someone who'd never doubted his right to speak. Vivian sat silent, watching her father at the head of the table nod approvingly at everything Damien said. Richard Sterling had built Sterling Dynamics from nothing 30 years ago, and somewhere along the way, he'd decided his daughter's brilliance was something to protect by hiding it completely. "You're too fragile for this world," he'd told her once, late at night in his office after she'd had what he called an episode during a board presentation. "Let Damien handle the public side. You do what you do best. Create. Stay safe." Safe. The word had become a cage. When the investors finally left, shaking Damien's hand and barely glancing at Vivian, her father caught her arm in the hallway. "You did well today," he said quietly. "Staying composed. That's progress." Vivian pulled her arm back. "I didn't say anything." "Exactly." He adjusted his tie, not meeting her eyes. "Damien has another presentation scheduled for next week. Major Defense Department contract. I need you to have the threat assessment protocols finished by Wednesday. Those protocols take 3 weeks minimum to..." "Wednesday, Vivian." His voice hardened just slightly. "Just enough. Damien's counting on you. We're all counting on you. You wouldn't want to let everyone down because you couldn't handle the pressure, would you?" The familiar tightness started in her chest, the feeling of walls closing in even though they stood in a wide hallway with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. She wanted to scream that she'd already handled more pressure than Damien ever had, that every breakthrough he claimed was hers, that she was tired of being treated like damaged goods in her own company. Instead, she said, "Wednesday. I'll have it ready." Her father smiled and walked away. Vivian stood alone in the empty hallway, watching rain streak down the windows, feeling like she was disappearing even as she stood still. She went back to her workspace on the 4th floor. Not an office, never an office, Just a corner desk in the development lab where the fluorescent lights hummed too loud and the air conditioning never quite worked right. Her team had gone home hours ago. She preferred working alone anyway. Fewer questions, fewer chances to fail at being normal. The threat assessment code sprawled across 3 monitors in intricate patterns only she fully understood. She'd been building this system for 8 months, creating something that could predict and neutralize cyber threats before they fully formed. It was some of her best work. And next week, Damien would present it to Defense Department officials as his own innovation while she sat in the back of the room like a ghost haunting her own creation. Her phone buzzed. A message from Damien. Need to see you. Rooftop Terrace, 8 p.m. Important. Vivian glanced at the clock. 7:47. She saved her work, grabbed her jacket, and took the elevator up through the building's spine toward whatever Damien wanted now. Probably another emergency that only she could solve while he took credit for the solution. That was how it always worked. The rooftop terrace was technically closed after 7, but executive access cards opened any door. Wind hit her the moment she stepped outside, carrying rain in horizontal sheets across the open space. The Seattle skyline glittered through the storm. All those lights and all those windows where people worked normal jobs with normal problems. Damien stood near the edge, his back to her, looking out over the city like he owned it. Maybe he did. Everyone thought he did. You wanted to see me, Vivian said. He turned. In the dim light from the building below, his face looked different, harder. The professional mask he wore in meetings had slipped away, revealing something colder underneath. We need to talk about your father, he said. What about him? He's getting old, Vivian, starting to second-guess decisions. Yesterday, he actually suggested we might need to reconsider the patent filings on the adaptive learning core. Damien took a step closer. Your adaptive learning core. Something in his tone made her skin prickle. What are you talking about? I'm talking about the fact that Richard is starting to develop something resembling a conscience. He's been having private conversations with the board about transparency, about giving credit where it's due. Damien's smile was all edges now, about telling the world his brilliant daughter has been the real genius behind Sterling Dynamics all along. Vivian's heart kicked against her ribs. He said that? He's considering it, which means I need to know where you stand. Damien closed the distance between them, rain soaking his expensive suit. Are you with me? Or are you going to let your father turn you into some kind of public spectacle? I don't understand. Yes, you do. His voice dropped lower. You know exactly what happens if the truth comes out. Everyone learns that Richard Sterling's crazy daughter has been locked in the basement creating code while the grown-ups ran the real company. Think about what that does to our credibility. Think about what that does to our stock price when investors find out the brilliant mind they've been betting on is someone who can barely get through a board meeting without falling apart. The words hit like physical blows. I'm not crazy. No? Damien pulled out his phone, tapped the screen, held it up. Then explain these. Vivian stared at the screen. Medical records. Her medical records. Anxiety disorder. Depression. Panic attacks. The medication she'd tried and stopped. The therapy sessions she'd attended for 2 years. All of it laid out in clinical detail that was supposed to be private and protected and absolutely none of Damien's business. How did you... I have access to everything, Vivian. Every email you've sent, every file you've created, every late-night message to your therapist thinking nobody would ever see it. He scrolled through the phone casually, like he was showing her vacation photos. It's all very touching, really. The brilliant girl who can't handle the pressure. The genius who needs her father to protect her from the big bad world. That's illegal. Her voice shook. That's reality. Damien pocketed his phone. And here's more reality. If you try to take credit for any of this work, I will make sure every investor, every journalist, every person who's ever heard of Sterling Dynamics knows exactly how unstable you are. I will bury you so deep in your own psychological history that nobody will ever trust you to run a coffee shop, let alone a technology company. The rain came down harder. Vivian's hair was plastered to her face. Her clothes soaked through, but she couldn't move, couldn't breathe properly. The rooftop tilted under her feet like the building itself was trying to throw her off. Why are you doing this? She whispered. Because I've earned this. Damien's voice stayed perfectly calm, reasonable, like he was explaining something obvious to a slow child. I've spent 5 years building this company's reputation. 5 years making deals, handling investors, turning your ideas into actual business. You think you can just step out of the shadows and take all that away because you wrote some code? That's not how the world works. I wrote all the code, all of it, every system, every algorithm, and I made it matter. He cut her off. You know what you'd be without me? Another brilliant nobody working in some university lab for $50,000 a year, publishing papers nobody reads. I gave you an empire. I made your work relevant. And you're going to throw that away because your father suddenly grew a conscience? He's right, though. The words came out before Vivian could stop them. People should know the truth. They should know who actually built. They should know you're having this conversation on a rooftop in a storm because you can't handle confrontation. Damien moved faster than she expected, backing her toward the edge. Then, they should know you're one bad day away from another breakdown. One tough question away from proving every stereotype about brilliant, fragile women who can't handle the real world. Stop. Vivian's heel hit the low wall that edged the terrace. Damien, stop. I'm offering you a choice. His face was inches from hers now, rain streaming between them. Stay quiet. Keep working. Let me handle everything you're too weak to handle yourself. Or try to tell your truth and watch me destroy what's left of your credibility before you finish your first sentence. The wind howled across the rooftop. Below them, 60 stories of empty air waited patiently. Behind Damien, the lit windows of Sterling Dynamics glowed like the eyes of something watching. I won't let you do this, Vivian said. Her voice was barely audible over the storm. I won't let you steal. You'll let me do whatever I want. Damien's hand shot out, gripping the railing beside her head, caging her against the edge. Because you know I'm right. You know you're not strong enough for this fight. You never were. Something broke inside Vivian's chest. Not her heart. Something older. Something that had been holding together her careful, quiet, obedient life for so long, she'd forgotten it was breakable. She shoved him, hard. Damien stumbled backward, surprise flashing across his face. For one perfect moment, Vivian felt powerful instead of small. For one perfect moment, she wasn't the hidden genius or the broken girl or her father's carefully protected secret. She was just angry. Then her heel slipped on the wet stone. The world tilted. The railing was suddenly behind her instead of beside her. Her hands grabbed at nothing. Rain and wind and empty air surrounded her on all sides. And she was falling backward over the edge with Damien's shocked face receding above her, and nothing between her and the ground except 60 stories of Seattle night. A hand caught her wrist. Vivian's fall stopped with a violent jerk that sent lightning through her shoulder. She dangled over nothing, rain in her eyes, her entire weight hanging from whoever had grabbed her at the last possible second. Above her, a man's voice said, "Don't move, I've got you." Not Damien's voice. Strong arms pulled her up and over the wall, depositing her on solid ground. Vivian collapsed onto wet stone, gasping, her hands shaking so badly she couldn't make them stop. Someone crouched beside her, a man in dark tactical clothes with rain dripping from his short hair and an expression of absolute calm on his face, like he pulled people from death every day. "You're okay," he said quietly. "You're safe. Just breathe." Yeah. Vivian tried to breathe. Couldn't. Her chest was too tight, her throat closed, panic flooding through her system faster than she could process it. She'd almost died. She'd been falling. She'd been in through your nose, out through your mouth. The man's voice stayed steady, not commanding, not pitying, just present. Match my breathing, in, out, that's it. Batura Basman. Somehow Vivian's lungs remembered how to work. Air moved in and out. The shaking got worse before it got better, but eventually it got better. The world stopped spinning quite so fast. "I'm Ethan," the man said. "Ethan Ryder. I'm head of security. I was doing a perimeter check when I heard voices up here." His eyes moved past her to where Damien stood frozen near the center of the terrace. "What happened?" "Nothing happened." Damien found his voice, smooth again, controlled. "Vivian got too close to the edge. Careless in this weather. Thank you for your quick response. We're fine now. Didn't look like nothing from where I was standing. Ethan didn't move, didn't stop watching Damien with those calm, assessing eyes. Looked like something. A misunderstanding. Damien straightened his jacket, tried for his professional smile. It didn't quite land right. I came up here to talk to Miss Sterling about a project deadline. The conversation got a bit heated. Nobody's fault, just tension. You know how it is. I don't, actually. Ethan stood, putting himself between Vivian and Damien without making it obvious. How about we get everyone inside? Talk about this somewhere dry. There's nothing to talk about. Damien's voice hardened, and I don't recall security being invited to executive discussions. This is above your clearance level, Ryder. Almost dying isn't above my clearance level. Ethan held Damien's stare. That's exactly my clearance level. But for a long moment, the two men watched each other across the rain-soaked terrace. Vivian stayed on the ground between them, feeling like a child while adults argued about what to do with her. That familiar feeling, that exhausting feeling of being a problem instead of a person. Finally, Damien stepped back. Fine. We'll continue this conversation another time, Vivian, when you're feeling more stable. He walked past them toward the door, paused with his hand on the handle. Remember what I said. Remember what happens if you forget. Then he was gone, and Vivian was alone with a stranger who'd just saved her life. Ethan crouched down again, eye level with her. Up close, she could see he was older than she'd first thought. Early 30s, maybe, with the kind of face that had seen things and decided not to talk about them. Rain dripped from his dark hair, and there was a small scar above his left eyebrow that looked old and permanent. Can you stand? He asked. I don't know. That's fair. He didn't try to pull her up, didn't rush her, just waited. Take your time. Vivian's hands were still shaking, but she managed to get her knees under her, stood slowly, testing whether her legs would hold. They did, barely. The rooftop spun less violently now. The rain felt real instead of dreamlike. Thank you, she said. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Ethan's expression stayed serious. What just happened up here? Nothing. Like he said, just a conversation. Conversations don't usually end with people going over railings. I slipped. The rain. You were 2 feet from the edge when I came through that door. I watched you back away from him until you ran out of room. Ethan's voice stayed quiet, but something in it made Vivian's throat tight. That wasn't slipping. That was being cornered. Up calm. You don't understand. Vivian wrapped her arms around herself, cold now that the adrenaline was fading. Damien and we have a complicated working relationship. He's under a lot of pressure with the defense contract coming up, and I haven't been delivering my best work lately. He was just trying to motivate me. By threatening you on a rooftop? He didn't threaten me. Then what did he do? Ski? Vivian opened her mouth, closed it. She had no answer that wouldn't sound insane or weak, or exactly like the unstable person Damien had called her. If she told the truth, that Damien had been blackmailing her with her own medical history, stealing her work, threatening to destroy her credibility, she would sound paranoid, delusional, exactly the way her father had always feared she would sound if anyone outside the family knew the real her. He reminded me of project deadlines, she finally said. That's all. Ethan studied her for a long moment. Rain ran down his face, and somewhere in the building below them, a door slammed shut. The storm was getting worse instead of better. Okay, he said eventually. If that's your story, I'll accept it for now. But I'm filing an incident report. Someone almost died on company property tonight, and that goes on record regardless of who's involved. Please don't. The words came out desperate. If my father finds out I was up here, if he thinks I can't handle, he'll pull me from the defense project. He'll put me on medical leave again. He'll what? Hide me. Make me invisible. Prove Damien right about everything. He'll worry, Vivian said instead. He worries too much already. Ethan was quiet for a moment. Then, I have a daughter. She's 7. And if someone told me she'd almost fallen off a building because of a work conversation, I'd want to know about it. I'd need to know about it. It's not the same. Maybe not. He moved toward the door, held it open. But either way, you're not staying up here. Come on, I'll walk you to your car. Vivian didn't have the energy to argue. She followed him into the stairwell, away from the rain and wind and the edge that had almost swallowed her. Her clothes dripped water onto the concrete steps as they descended through the building's core. Neither of them spoke until they reached the fourth-floor landing, where Vivian stopped. "My car's in the garage," she said, "but I need to get my things from the lab first. I left everything. I'll wait." "You don't have to—" "Oh, I'm waiting." Ethan leaned against the wall, arms crossed. Not angry, not impatient, just present. Like he decided she was his responsibility now and wasn't going to change his mind. Vivian gave up. She pushed through the lab doors into the familiar harsh light and humming silence of her workspace. Everything was exactly where she'd left it. Monitors still glowing with lines of code, cold coffee in a mug beside her keyboard. Her jacket draped over the chair back. Evidence of her life. Evidence that she existed even when nobody was watching. She saved her work, shut down the systems, grabbed her bag. When she came back out, Ethan was exactly where she'd left him, checking his phone with an expression that might have been concern. "Everything okay?" she asked. "Babysitter texted. My daughter's having a nightmare. Wants me to come home." He pocketed the phone. "But I'm still walking you to your car first. You should go. She needs you." "She's safe with someone she trusts. You're not safe yet." Ethan started down the stairs again. "I'll be home in 10 minutes. She'll survive." Something about the casualness of it, the way he prioritized her safety over his own convenience without making it a big deal, made Vivian's eyes burn. She blinked hard, following him down through the empty building toward the parking garage. Their footsteps echoed off concrete walls. "How long have you been with Sterling Dynamics?" she asked, needing to fill the silence with something other than her own thoughts. 6 months. I was military before this, private security overseas. Paid better, but I got tired of being away from my daughter." He glanced back at her. "You run the development team, right? That's what Damien said in the meeting?" "Sort of. I do the actual development. Damien runs everything else." "Must be frustrating." "What must be?" "Doing the work while someone else takes the credit." They reached the garage level, pushed through the doors into the vast concrete space filled with expensive cars. "I've had commanders like that. Officers who'd send you into danger and then write reports making themselves sound like heroes. Always hated that." Vivian's car was on the far side, a modest sedan that looked pathetic next to the Teslas and BMWs owned by executives who actually got paid what they were worth. She fumbled with her keys, hands still shaking slightly. "I don't mind it," she said, not looking at Ethan. "The credit part, I mean. I'm better behind the scenes anyway. Less pressure." "You keep saying that." "Saying what?" "That you can't handle things. That you're better hidden. That you need less pressure." Ethan waited while she unlocked the car. "You just created an AI system sophisticated enough to interest the Defense Department. Doesn't sound like someone who can't handle pressure to me. You don't know me." "No," he agreed, "but I know what I saw on that roof. And it wasn't someone who couldn't handle things. It was someone being handled." The words hung in the garage air. Vivian wanted to argue, to defend Damien or her father or the careful system they'd built to keep her safe and small and hidden from a world they said would hurt her. But she was too tired, too shaken, too done with pretending tonight had been normal. "I should go," she said quietly. "Thank you again. For everything." She got in the car, started the engine. Ethan stepped back but didn't leave, just stood there watching as she pulled out of the space and drove toward the exit. In her rear-view mirror, she could see him still standing there, a dark figure in tactical black, until the garage swallowed him up and she was alone again. The drive home took 20 minutes through rain-slicked Seattle streets. Vivian's apartment was in a quiet building downtown, expensive but not ostentatious, the kind of place where she could disappear into anonymity. She rode the elevator to the 15th floor, let herself into the dark space, and stood dripping in her entryway while her heart refused to slow down. She'd almost died tonight. She'd almost fallen 60 stories because she'd finally tried to stand up for herself, and Damien had backed her into a corner until there was nowhere left to go. And the worst part, the absolute worst part, was that he'd been right about one thing. She wasn't strong enough for this fight. Not alone. Not against someone who had access to her medical history, her private communications, her father's protection. Vivian went to the bathroom, stripped off her wet clothes, stood under a scalding shower until her skin turned red. The shaking wouldn't stop. The memory of falling wouldn't leave. Over and over, she felt that moment when the railing disappeared and there was nothing beneath her except empty air. She thought about Ethan's hand catching her wrist, the calm in his voice, the way he'd looked at Damien like he could see through all that expensive charm to whatever lived underneath. That wasn't slipping, that was being cornered. Nobody had ever said that to her before. Nobody had ever suggested that maybe she wasn't the problem. That maybe the people who claimed to protect her were the ones she needed protection from. Vivian got out of the shower, dried off, pulled on comfortable clothes that didn't smell like rain and fear. Her phone buzzed on the bathroom counter. A message from her father. Damien says you had an incident tonight. Call me tomorrow. We need to discuss your state of mind. Not, are you okay? Not, what happened? Just, we need to discuss your state of mind. Like she was a problem to be managed rather than a person who'd almost died. She didn't respond. Instead, she went to her home office, a spare bedroom converted into a workspace that looked like a smaller version of her lab at Sterling, and opened her laptop. The threat assessment code was backed up on her personal server, along with everything else she'd ever created. Years of work, thousands of hours. The entire foundation of Sterling Dynamics' technological superiority. All of it existed because of her. None of it belonged to her. Not legally, not publicly, not in any way that mattered. Vivian opened a new document and started typing. Not code this time. Words. A record of everything Damien had said tonight. Everything he'd threatened. Every detail she could remember about the medical files on his phone, the blackmail, the way he'd backed her toward the edge. She documented it all in clinical detail, then saved the file with a timestamp and encryption that would require a password only she knew. Evidence. Not enough to use yet, maybe never enough, but evidence all the same. Outside her windows, Seattle glittered through the continuing rain. Somewhere in that city, Damien was probably sleeping peacefully, confident that he'd handled tonight's problem. Somewhere closer, Ethan was probably comforting his daughter, being the kind of father who actually showed up when his child was scared. And here, in this anonymous apartment where she'd hidden for so long she'd forgotten what being visible felt like, Vivian sat alone with her laptop and made the first tiny decision to stop letting other people write her story. She didn't know it yet, but that decision would change everything. The rain kept falling. The night got darker. And somewhere in Sterling Dynamics' security office, Ethan Ryder was beginning his own investigation into what had really happened on that rooftop, because men like Damien Voss didn't corner women in storms for innocent reasons. And because sometimes the job wasn't just about physical security. Sometimes it was about protecting people from threats they'd been taught to call protection. If you or someone you know is having a difficult time, free support is available. Find resources. Vivian didn't sleep that night. She lay in bed watching shadows move across her ceiling while her mind replayed the fall over and over. The moment when gravity took over and nothing was beneath her except death. By the time gray dawnlight filtered through her curtains, she'd made a decision that terrified her more than falling had. She was going to find out exactly what Damien had on her. And then she was going to take it back. At 7:30 Monday morning, she walked into Sterling Dynamics with her security badge, a large coffee she wouldn't drink, and a sick feeling in her stomach that wouldn't go away. The lobby was already busy with early employees, everyone moving with that Monday determination to prove the weekend hadn't made them soft. Vivian kept her head down, headed for the elevators, and nearly collided with someone coming from the security office. Ethan Ryder stepped back, 2 coffees balanced in one hand. Careful. Sorry, I wasn't... Vivian stopped. He was wearing the same tactical clothes from Friday night, and his eyes had that particular exhaustion that came from not sleeping rather than just being tired. Did you work all weekend? Catching up on some things. He held out one of the coffees. This is yours if you want it. You look like you need it more than me. Vivian stared at the offered cup. You bought me coffee? I bought coffee. You happened to show up. Take it or don't. But there was something careful in the way he said it, like he'd specifically been waiting for her. She took the coffee. It was hot, and exactly the kind she usually ordered from the fourth floor break room. Dark roast, no sugar, splash of cream. How did you know? Security sees everything, including coffee orders. Ethan's expression stayed neutral, but something in his eyes wasn't. You doing okay? After Friday? I'm fine. That's not what I asked. People were moving around them, heading to elevators, talking about their weekends. Too many ears, too public. Vivian lowered her voice. Can we not do this here? Then where? I don't know. Nowhere. I'm fine. Thank you for the coffee. She started toward the elevators again. Ethan's voice followed her. My office. Third floor. When you have time. Vivian didn't answer. She got in the elevator with 6 other people and rode up to the 4th floor, walked to her corner desk in the lab, set down both coffees, and tried to make her hands stop shaking. The coffee he'd bought her sat there getting cold while she logged into her systems and pretended Friday night hadn't happened. The lab filled up slowly as her team arrived. Marcus from Algorithms came in humming something off-key. Jennifer from Testing brought donuts nobody would eat. David from Hardware started complaining about his commute before his coat was even off. Normal Monday morning sounds. Normal people with normal problems. Vivian? Marcus stopped at her desk, concern on his face. You look terrible. You sick? Just tired. Worked late Friday. The defense protocols? Yeah, those are due Wednesday, right? He winced sympathetically. Damien's been sending emails all weekend about how critical they are. Man's stressed. Vivian's jaw tightened. I'm sure he is. You need help? I can push some testing schedules, free up a few hours. No, I've got it. She pulled up the threat assessment code, stared at lines of work she'd created while Damien prepared to present it as his own. Thanks, though. Marcus lingered like he wanted to say something else, then just squeezed her shoulder and went to his own desk. Vivian worked steadily for 2 hours, refining algorithms, testing response times, building something powerful enough to protect military networks from sophisticated attacks. Her fingers moved across the keyboard with practiced efficiency, while her mind circled around Damien's phone and the medical records he'd shown her, and the question of how he'd gotten access to information that should have been completely private. At 10:15, her desk phone rang. Internal extension. She almost didn't answer. Development lab. Miss Sterling. Her father's voice. Crisp and formal, even though they'd eaten dinner together 100 times. My office. Now please. Aki gi. Waltz. He hung up before she could respond. Vivian saved her work, stood slowly, and walked toward the executive floor with her heart beating too fast. Her father's office was on the 28th floor, all glass and steel and furniture that cost more than most people's cars. His assistant waved her through without comment. Richard Sterling stood at his windows overlooking the city, hands clasped behind his back. He didn't turn when she entered. Close the door, he said. Vivian closed it. Damien tells me you had an accident Friday night on the rooftop. It wasn't an accident. I slipped. In a restricted area, during a storm, after an emotional conversation about work performance. Now he turned, and his face was all controlled disappointment. What were you thinking? I was thinking Damien asked me to meet him there. And you went, alone, at night, to a dangerous location. Richard moved to his desk, sat down, steepled his fingers. Do you understand how this looks? Do you understand what could have happened if our head of security hadn't been there? I would have died. The bluntness of it made her father flinch. Don't be dramatic. I'm not being dramatic. I almost fell 60 stories. That's called dying. You slipped because you weren't being careful, because you let a work discussion escalate into something that affected your judgment. He opened a drawer, pulled out a file folder. I've been reviewing your recent medical records. You stopped taking your medication 4 months ago. Ice flooded Vivian's chest. Those records are private. You're on the company health insurance. Nothing is private when it comes to ensuring my employees' well-being. He opened the folder, scanned something inside. Doctor, Patterson notes you've missed your last 3 therapy sessions. She's concerned about your stress levels and your refusal to maintain your treatment plan. Doctor, Patterson wouldn't share that information without my permission. Dr. Patterson works for a practice that accepts Sterling Dynamics insurance. When I express concern about an employee, especially one who's my daughter, people cooperate. Richard closed the folder. I think we need to consider medical leave. Just temporarily, until you're stable again. I'm stable now. You almost fell off a building on Friday. Because Damien cornered me. The words came out harder than Vivian intended. Because he was threatening me. Because you let a professional conversation become personal. Her father's voice stayed calm, which was somehow worse than if he'd yelled. Damien explained everything. He was trying to motivate you regarding the defense deadline. You became agitated. He tried to help, and you panicked. That's not what happened. Then what did happen? Vivian opened her mouth. Nothing came out. How could she explain that Damien had been blackmailing her with stolen medical records when her father had apparently given him access to those records in the first place? How could she prove anything when everyone already believed she was unstable? I thought so. Richard stood, came around the desk. For a moment, Vivian thought he might hug her, but he just stood close, looking down with that expression of patient disappointment she'd seen her whole life. Sweetheart, I know you want to believe you're ready for more responsibility, but incidents like Friday prove you're not. Not yet. Maybe not ever, and that's okay. Some people are meant to create. Others are meant to lead. You're brilliant at creating. Let Damien handle the rest. Everything I've built was built in a safe environment where you don't have to face investors or media or the pressure of public scrutiny. I've protected you from all that. Damien's protected you from all that. He touched her shoulder gently. Don't throw away that protection because you're having a moment of pride. The word pride hit like a slap, as if wanting credit for her own work was ego instead of basic fairness, as if she was being selfish rather than just asking to be seen. I want to finish the defense protocols, she said quietly. I'll have them done by Wednesday. After that, we can discuss everything else. Her father studied her face for a long moment. Fine, but after Wednesday, you're taking 2 weeks off, mandatory rest. I'll have Dr. Patterson set up a full evaluation. We need to make sure you're actually capable of handling your current responsibilities before we discuss anything else. I'm capable. Then prove it. Get the protocols done. No more incidents. No more late-night meetings in dangerous locations. Show me you can be trusted to take care of yourself. He moved back behind his desk, already dismissing her. That's all. Vivian left the office feeling smaller than when she'd entered. She took the stairs down instead of the elevator, needing the physical movement to burn off the anger and shame churning in her chest. 8 flights down, she pushed through a door into an empty hallway and just stood there breathing hard, trying not to cry, trying not to fall apart in the middle of the workday like everyone expected her to. Vivian? She spun around. Ethan was standing 10 feet away, coming from the direction of the security office on this floor. He took in her face, her clenched fists, the way she was barely holding it together. What happened? He asked. Nothing. I'm fine. Stop saying that. He moved closer, not touching her but present. You're not fine. What happened? My father thinks I'm crazy. Damien thinks I'm weak. Everyone thinks Friday was my fault because I can't handle pressure and I panic and I'm too broken to be trusted with my own life. The words spilled out before she could stop them. And maybe they're right. Maybe I am too broken. Maybe I should just shut up and stay hidden and let everyone keep stealing my work because at least then I'm safe. Ethan was quiet for a moment. Then, you know that's bullshit, right? Vivian laughed, but it came out bitter. Is it? Yes, I've been reading your file. Everyone's been reading my file, apparently. Not your medical file, your work file. I spent the weekend going through old project reports, patent applications, code documentation. His expression was serious. Every major breakthrough Sterling Dynamics has had in the last 5 years traces back to you. Every single one. The adaptive learning system? Yours. The predictive security protocols? Yours. The neural network optimization that made us attractive to Defense Department contracts? Also yours. How do you... Because I know how to read metadata, how to track file creation dates, how to see who actually wrote what code before someone else's name got attached to it. Ethan pulled out his phone, showed her a screen full of time-stamped documents. Damien Voss hasn't created a single line of original code in 3 years. He's been taking your work, filing patents under his name, and presenting it to investors as his own innovation. Vivian stared at the phone. That's corporate theft. Yes. Why are you showing me this? Because someone needs to. Ethan pocketed the phone. And because what happened on that roof Friday wasn't about work deadlines or motivation. It was about control. He's been controlling you for years, and the moment you showed signs of fighting back, he tried to destroy you. You can't know that. I can know that I saw him stand there and watch you fall. I can know that he didn't try to catch you, didn't even move, just watched. Something dangerous flickered in Ethan's eyes. I can also know that's not how innocent people behave when someone they supposedly work with is about to die. The hallway felt too small suddenly, too quiet. Vivian's throat was tight. Even if all that's true, what am I supposed to do? I have no proof, no leverage. Damien has access to everything. My medical records, my emails, my entire psychiatric history. The moment I try to expose him, he'll destroy my credibility before I finish talking. Then we get proof first. We build a case he can't refute. We find out exactly what he's stolen, how he's stolen it, and who helped him. Ethan's voice stayed calm but certain. And then you take back what's yours. You make it sound simple. It's not simple. It's just necessary. He checked his watch. I have to pick up my daughter from school in 4 hours. Until then, I'm reviewing security footage from the last 6 months, looking for patterns, meetings, communication with outside parties. If Damien's selling stolen technology, he's doing it somewhere on company property, and that means there's evidence. Why are you doing this? Vivian asked. Why do you care? Ethan was quiet for a moment. Then, my ex-wife used to tell me I was too protective, that I saw threats everywhere, that I needed to let people fight their own battles. He met Vivian's eyes. Then she died in a car accident that wasn't an accident. Someone cut her brake lines because she was about to expose some corporate fraud at her company. Police never proved it, but I know what happened. I know she died because nobody protected her when she needed it. The hallway was silent. Somewhere far away, a phone rang and went unanswered. I'm not letting that happen again, Ethan said quietly. Not if I can stop it. Vivian didn't know what to say. This stranger who'd pulled her from death was apparently willing to risk his job, maybe his safety, to help her fight a battle everyone said she couldn't win. It didn't make sense. People didn't do things like that for people they barely knew. I have to finish the defense protocols by Wednesday, she finally said. If I don't, my father will put me on medical leave and I'll lose access to everything. Then finish them. I'll keep digging. Wednesday evening, after you submit, come to the security office. I'll show you what I found. He started to walk away, then stopped. And Vivian, stop telling people you're fine. You're not fine. You're being systematically abused by people who are supposed to protect you. Being not fine about that doesn't make you broken. It makes you human. He left. Vivian stood alone in the empty hallway, his words echoing in her head. Being not fine doesn't make you broken. It makes you human. She'd never thought about it that way before. The next 2 days blurred together in a haze of code, coffee, and carefully controlled panic. Vivian worked 18-hour shifts, finishing the threat assessment protocols, while dodging questions from her team and avoiding Damien entirely. She saw him twice from a distance, once in the cafeteria talking to investors, once in the parking garage getting into his Tesla. But he didn't approach her and she didn't acknowledge him. A cold war of silence. Tuesday night, Marcus found her still at her desk at 11 p.m. You're going to burn out, he said, dropping a protein bar on her keyboard. Eat something. Sleep. The protocols will still be here tomorrow. They're due tomorrow. They're always due tomorrow. That's how Damien operates. Impossible deadlines, constant pressure. Marcus sat on the edge of her desk. Between you and me, I think he does it on purpose. Keeps everyone too stressed to ask questions. Vivian looked up. Questions about what? About why he's the one presenting work the rest of us actually built. About why his name is on patents for code he didn't write. Marcus lowered his voice. We all know, Vivian. Everyone on the team knows you do the real work. We've just been too scared of getting fired to say anything. If you knew, why didn't you... Because I have a mortgage and 2 kids and a job market that doesn't give a damn about integrity when companies can hire younger and cheaper. He looked genuinely apologetic. I'm not proud of it, but that's reality. Vivian saved her work, turned in her chair to face him properly. What if there was a way to fix it, to prove what's actually happening? You'd need evidence Damien can't deny, and you'd need someone with more power than him willing to believe you. Marcus shook his head. Your father's not going to turn on his golden boy. The board loves Damien. Investors think he's a genius. You're fighting an entire system built to protect him. But if I had proof, then maybe you'd have a chance. He stood up. Just be careful, okay? Damien's not someone who loses gracefully. Whatever you're thinking about doing, make sure you're ready for the consequences. He left. Vivian sat alone in the lab's fluorescent silence, staring at her screens. Wednesday was 8 hours away. The protocols were 95% complete. And somewhere in this building, Ethan Ryder was compiling evidence that might actually give her a fighting chance. She worked until 3 a.m., finally finishing the last testing sequence. The threat assessment system was complete, sophisticated enough to predict cyber attacks before they happened, adaptable enough to learn from new threats, powerful enough to protect critical infrastructure from sophisticated enemies. It was some of the best work she'd ever done. And tomorrow, Damien would present it to Defense Department officials as his own creation while she sat silent in the back of the room, unless she stopped being silent. Vivian went home, showered, changed clothes, came back to the office by 6 a.m. She ran final tests, fixed 2 minor bugs, compiled everything into a presentation package. At 8:30, she submitted the completed protocols to Damien via the company system with a simple message. Defense protocols complete. All documentation attached. His response came 2 minutes later. Excellent work. Presentation is at 2 p.m. Be there. Not, thank you. Not, this is impressive. Just be there, like she was an assistant instead of the person who'd built everything he was about to claim. The morning crawled past. Vivian tried to work on other projects but couldn't focus. At noon, she gave up and went down to the 3rd floor, to the security office tucked away in a corner most employees never visited. She knocked once. It's open, Ryan. The office was smaller than she'd expected. Just a desk, several monitors showing camera feeds from around the building, filing cabinets, and a coffee maker that looked like it had seen better days. Ethan sat at the desk reviewing footage, his daughter's artwork taped to the wall behind him. Crayon drawings of stick figures holding hands under a sun. You're early, he said, without looking up. The presentation's at 2. I couldn't wait anymore. Vivian closed the door. Did you find anything? More than anything, I found everything. Ethan pulled up files on his main monitor. Sit down, this is going to take a minute. Vivian sat. Ethan clicked through documents, emails, security footage, transfer records, communication logs. The story they told was worse than she'd imagined. Damien's been stealing your work systematically for 3 years, Ethan said. Every time you complete a project, he accesses your files using administrative credentials. Credentials your father gave him, by the way, copies everything and refiles it under his own name. Then he deletes the metadata that would prove original authorship. How is that possible? The system should track It does track, but he's been using a security backdoor to cover his access. Same backdoor that gave him access to your medical records, your email, your therapy notes. Ethan pulled up more footage. This is him, 3 weeks ago, in the medical records office after hours. And this is him meeting with TechCore representatives in the parking garage, transferring files from a personal device. Vivian watched the grainy footage of Damien handing over what looked like a USB drive. TechCore? They're our biggest competitor. They are. And they've been getting Sterling Dynamics proprietary technology for the last 18 months. Technology they're using to undercut your bids and steal your contracts. Ethan met her eyes. He's not just taking credit for your work. He's selling it. The room spun slightly. That's corporate espionage. Yes, that's a federal crime. Also yes. And my father doesn't know? Ethan hesitated. I can't prove your father knows, but I can prove he's given Damien unrestricted access to everything in this company, including things that should have been protected. Either he's complicit or he's dangerously negligent. Vivian stood up, paced the small office. Her whole body felt electric with rage and vindication and terror. What do I do with this? That depends on what you want to happen. I want to stop him. I want everyone to know the truth. She stopped, turned to face Ethan. I want to walk into that presentation at 2 p.m. and tell every Defense Department official exactly who built the system they're about to buy. That's risky. I don't care anymore. You should care. If you confront him publicly without backup, he'll deny everything. He'll use your medical history against you. He'll make you look unstable and paranoid, and the officials will believe him because he's charming and confident, and you're the quiet girl nobody's ever heard of. Ethan stood too. But if you're serious about this, if you're really ready, I have a better plan. What plan? The presentation's at 2. I need you to go. Sit in the back like always. Let Damien do his whole performance. Let him claim credit for everything you built. He pulled out a phone, not his personal phone, something different. I've been talking to someone at the FBI who specializes in corporate fraud. She's very interested in Damien's relationship with TechCore. She's also very interested in systematic intellectual property theft from government contractors. Vivian's heart kicked. The FBI? I sent her everything I found. She wants to move forward, but she needs testimony from the actual victim. She needs you to make a formal statement, and she needs Damien to demonstrate clear pattern of behavior. Ethan's expression was serious. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to that presentation. You're going to watch Damien present your work, and you're going to record every word of it on this phone. Then, after the presentation, you're going to meet with Special Agent Morrison and tell her everything. Every threat, every theft, every moment of blackmail and manipulation. You're going to give her enough evidence to arrest Damien Voss and anyone else involved in this fraud. And if you do that, this ends. Not just for you. For every person he's ever stolen from or manipulated or threatened. Ethan handed her the phone. But once you start this, there's no taking it back. The FBI doesn't drop cases because they get uncomfortable. If you testify, you'll have to tell them everything, including the things you're ashamed of, including the ways you've been hurt. Vivian took the phone. It was heavier than it should have been. Or maybe that was just the weight of the decision. I'm tired of hiding, she said quietly. I'm tired of letting people treat me like I'm too broken to deserve my own life. Then stop letting them. Ethan checked his watch. You have 3 hours until the presentation. Go somewhere quiet. Think about what you're going to say when the FBI asks why you waited so long to come forward. Think about how you'll handle it when Damien tries to destroy your credibility. Think about whether you're really ready for everyone to know the truth. You think I'm not ready. I think you're terrified, but I also think you're stronger than anyone's ever let you believe. He opened the office door. The FBI agent's number is already programmed into that phone. After the presentation, call her, or don't. That's your choice. But make it your choice, not someone else's decision about what you can handle. Vivian left the security office with the phone burning a hole in her pocket. She went back to the lab, gathered her things, and walked out of Sterling Dynamics into the gray afternoon light. For an hour, she drove aimlessly through Seattle, not going home, not going anywhere, just moving because staying still felt impossible. Finally, she parked near the waterfront and sat watching ferries cross Puget Sound while cold wind cut through her jacket. The phone Ethan had given her sat in her lap. One call. That's all it would take. One call and everything would change. Or everything would fall apart. She'd be the unstable daughter who couldn't handle pressure, the paranoid employee with a persecution complex, the girl who'd been protected her whole life and repaid that protection with accusations and betrayal. Vivian thought about Friday night, the rooftop, the fall, the moment she'd been absolutely certain she was going to die. She thought about Damien's face as he'd watched her go over the edge. She thought about her father saying, some people are meant to create, others are meant to lead. Like those were different categories instead of just different fears. At 1:45, she drove back to Sterling Dynamics. The Defense Department presentation was being held in the executive conference room on the 28th floor, the same room where she'd sat invisible while Damien claimed credit for her adaptive learning system months ago. She rode the elevator up with the phone in her pocket, and her heart in her throat, and absolutely no idea what she was about to do. The conference room was already full. Military officials in dress uniforms, defense contractors in expensive suits, her father at the head of the table looking proud, Damien at the presentation screen looking confident and comfortable and completely at ease with the lie he was about to tell. Vivian slipped into a seat at the back of the room. Damien saw her, nodded slightly, smiled like they were colleagues instead of enemies. Like Friday night had never happened. Like he hadn't threatened to destroy her entire life 48 hours ago. "Gentlemen," Damien began, his voice warm and authoritative, "thank you for giving us this opportunity to present Sterling Dynamics' revolutionary threat assessment platform. What you're about to see represents 3 years of intensive development and innovation." Vivian pulled out the FBI phone, opened the recording app, hit record, and for the next hour, she sat perfectly still while Damien Voss explained in meticulous detail exactly how he'd built the system that Vivian had actually created. She watched him answer technical questions with information he'd learned from her documentation. She watched defense officials nod approvingly at his expertise. She watched her father beam with pride at his protégé's brilliance, and she recorded every single word. When the presentation ended, the defense officials stood and shook Damien's hand with the kind of enthusiasm reserved for people who just solved their most pressing problems. Major General Patricia Holbrook, the lead official, spent 5 minutes asking detailed technical questions that Damien answered smoothly, pulling explanations directly from documentation Vivian had written at 2 in the morning 3 weeks ago. "This is exactly what we need for the Eastern Security Initiative," Holbrook said. "Mr. Voss, your work here is exceptional. We'll have contracts drawn up by end of week." "I appreciate that, General." Damien's smile was perfect. "This project has been a labor of passion for me. When you're building systems that will protect American lives, you don't cut corners." Vivian's hand tightened around the phone in her lap. The recording app showed 63 minutes of footage. Every lie, every stolen explanation, every moment of Damien claiming ownership of work that had cost her 3 years of her life. The officials filed out, still talking excitedly about implementation timelines and integration protocols. Her father clapped Damien on the shoulder, said something about celebratory drinks later. The room emptied until only Damien remained, gathering his presentation materials, looking satisfied in a way that made Vivian's stomach turn. He glanced back at her, still sitting alone in the last row. "You can go now," he said casually. "Thanks for being here. It helps having the development team represented, even if you don't contribute much to the discussion." Vivian stood slowly. The phone felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. "That was my work." "Sorry?" "Everything you just presented. Every algorithm, every response protocol, every line of threat assessment code. I wrote all of it. You know I wrote all of it." Damien set down his materials carefully. "Are we really doing this again? I thought we had an understanding after Friday." "We had you threatening me on a rooftop. That's not an understanding. That's assault." "That's your interpretation. My interpretation is that I tried to have a difficult conversation with an increasingly unstable employee who became agitated and endangered herself." He walked closer, his voice dropping to something quieter, more dangerous. "Tell me, Vivian, did you take your medication today? Have you been seeing Dr. Patterson like your father asked? Or are you having another episode?" "I'm not having an episode." "Then what do you call confronting me after a successful presentation? What do you call these paranoid accusations?" He was right in front of her now, close enough that she could smell his cologne. "Everyone's worried about you, your father, your team, even building security, apparently. Ethan Ryder filed a concerning incident report about your mental state. People are noticing." Vivian's pulse hammered. "You're lying." "Am I? Ask your father. Ask anyone." Damien tilted his head, studying her with false concern. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to go home. You're going to rest. Tomorrow you're going to apologize for this outburst and confirm that you understand your role here. And then we're all going to move forward like professionals. And if I don't, then I release every piece of documentation I have about your psychiatric history, every therapy session where you talked about feeling worthless, every medication you've tried and failed, every moment of weakness you've ever shown." His smile was cold, I'll make sure every tech blog, every industry publication, every person who's ever heard of Sterling Dynamics knows that the real creator of our technology is someone who can't be trusted to manage her own mental health, let alone critical defense systems. The conference room felt airless. Vivian could hear her own heartbeat, too loud, too fast. For 3 years she'd let him do this. Let him take her work, her credibility, her entire professional existence. Let him convince her that speaking up would only prove she was as broken as everyone feared. But she wasn't in that room alone. Not really. Somewhere in this building, Ethan was waiting for her to make the call. And in her pocket, 63 minutes of recorded evidence proved exactly what Damien Voss was. I quit, Vivian said. Damien blinked. What? I quit, effective immediately. You can't steal my work anymore if I'm not here to create it. She moved past him toward the door. You can't quit. Your father won't let you quit. Watch me. His hand caught her arm, gripped tight enough to hurt. You walk out that door, I destroy you. I will make it my personal mission to ensure you never work in tech again. Every company you apply to will hear about your instability. Every reference check will reveal exactly why Sterling Dynamics had to let you go. Vivian looked down at his hand on her arm, then up at his face. You're hurting me. I'm trying to help you understand reality. No, you're assaulting me. Again. She pulled her arm free, and when he grabbed for her again, she stepped back fast enough that he stumbled slightly. Don't touch me. Don't follow me. Don't contact me. Vivian. But she was already gone, through the conference room door and down the hallway toward the elevators. Her hand shook so badly, she could barely press the button. The elevator took forever. When the doors finally opened, she got in and pressed the button for the parking garage, then immediately changed her mind and pressed the 3rd floor instead. Ethan's office. She needed to get to Ethan's office before she lost her nerve completely. The 3rd floor was quiet when she stumbled out of the elevator. The security office door was closed. She knocked once, then twice when nobody answered immediately. Come in. Ethan was at his desk, but he wasn't alone. A woman in her late 40s sat across from him, professional suit, FBI credentials clipped to her belt. She stood when Vivian entered. Miss Sterling? The woman's voice was calm and direct. I'm Special Agent Claire Morrison. Mr. Ryder's been filling me in on your situation. I understand you have information about corporate fraud at Sterling Dynamics. Vivian looked at Ethan. He nodded once, steady and certain. I recorded Damien's presentation, Vivian said. The whole thing. Him claiming credit for work he didn't do. Him answering technical questions using my documentation. That's a start? Morrison gestured to the empty chair. But I'm going to need more than that. I need you to tell me everything, from the beginning. How long this has been happening. What methods he's used, what threats he's made. I need details, Miss Sterling, the kind that hold up in federal court. Vivian sat. The office felt too small suddenly, with 3 people and the weight of the decision she was about to make. If I do this, if I testify, what happens to me? That depends on what you tell me. If Damien Voss has been engaged in corporate espionage, intellectual property theft, blackmail, and selling proprietary technology to competitors, he's looking at serious federal charges. Multiple felonies, prison time. Morrison pulled out a tablet, opened a note-taking app. But prosecuting powerful people requires airtight cases. I need you to be completely honest with me, even about the parts that are hard to talk about, even about the parts that make you look bad. What about my father? What about him? He gave Damien access to everything, my medical records, my files, administrative credentials. Either he knew what Damien was doing or he was criminally negligent. Vivian's throat was tight. If I testify against Damien, does my father go to prison too? Morrison exchanged a glance with Ethan. That depends on what we find. If your father was actively complicit in the fraud, yes, he'd face charges. If he was manipulated or negligent, that's a different situation. But I won't lie to you, Miss Sterling. Once we start investigating, we follow the evidence wherever it goes, even if it goes places you don't want it to go. Vivian sat back in his chair, staring at the ceiling. Her father had spent her entire life telling her he was protecting her, keeping her safe, making sure the world didn't hurt his fragile, brilliant daughter who couldn't handle reality without falling apart. But he'd also given Damien unrestricted access to her private medical information. He'd allowed her work to be systematically stolen. He'd told her she was too broken to lead while promoting the man who'd been destroying her from the inside. That wasn't protection. That was imprisonment disguised as love. Okay, Vivian said. I'll tell you everything. Well, for the next 2 hours, she talked. Morrison recorded it all on her tablet, occasionally stopping Vivian to ask for clarification or specific dates. Ethan sat quietly in the corner, not interrupting, just present. Vivian told them about the first time she'd realized Damien was taking credit for her work, about the gradual escalation from casual credit stealing to systematic theft, about the night he'd shown her the medical records and threatened to expose her psychiatric history if she didn't stay quiet. Did he ever explicitly threaten physical harm? Morrison asked. Friday night, on the rooftop. Vivian's hands were shaking again. He backed me toward the edge. He told me I was too weak to fight him. When I pushed back, I slipped and nearly fell. He just watched. He didn't try to catch me. But Mr. Ryder did. Ethan saved my life. Morrison made notes, her expression neutral. And after the incident, what did Mr. Voss say? What? Nothing. He told building security it was an accident, that I'd been careless. He made it sound like my fault. What about your father? How did he react? He told me I was being dramatic, that I'd let a work conversation get out of hand because I'd stopped taking my medication. Vivian's voice cracked slightly. He said I needed medical leave, that I couldn't be trusted with my current responsibilities. He made it sound like I was the problem, not Damien. Boss. Morrison set down her tablet. Miss Sterling, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest. Have you been diagnosed with any mental health conditions? Are you currently receiving treatment? The question hung in the air like a trap waiting to close. This was it. The moment Damien had promised would destroy her. The moment everyone would decide she was too unstable to be believed. Yes, Vivian said quietly. I have generalized anxiety disorder and depression. I was in therapy for 2 years. I tried several different medications but stopped 4 months ago because the side effects were worse than the symptoms. And does that diagnosis affect your ability to accurately report what's been happening? No. You're sure? I'm sure that having anxiety doesn't make me a liar. I'm sure that being depressed doesn't mean I imagined 3 years of systematic theft and blackmail. Vivian met Morrison's eyes directly. I'm sure that Damien Voss has been using my medical history as a weapon to keep me silent. And that strategy only works if people like you decide mental illness makes me unreliable. Morrison was quiet for a moment. Then she smiled slightly. Fair enough. For what it's worth, Miss Sterling, I've been doing this job for 15 years. I've interviewed hundreds of witnesses. And in my experience, people who've been genuinely wronged have a specific way of talking about it. They remember details. They have documentation. They can point to specific moments when things went wrong. She picked up her tablet again. You have all of that, plus recording of today's presentation, plus whatever evidence Mr. Ryder has compiled. That's a strong case. Strong enough to prosecute? Strong enough to investigate officially. I'll need to bring this to my supervisor, get authorization for a full investigation. That takes time, usually a week or 2. During that period, you need to act completely normal. Keep going to work if you can. Don't confront Voss again. Don't tell anyone what you've told me today. I already told him I quit. Morrison winced. That complicates things. He'll be suspicious now. He might start destroying evidence or covering his tracks. She thought for a moment. Okay, new plan. Tomorrow morning, you go to your father. You tell him you were emotional yesterday, that you're sorry for the outburst, that you want to keep working. You walk back the resignation. Can you do that? Vivian's stomach turned. You want me to apologize to them? I want you to buy us time to build an airtight case. Voss is smart and connected. If he knows we're coming, he'll have lawyers and press statements ready before we can file charges. But if he thinks you've backed down, thinks he's won, he'll get careless. Morrison leaned forward. I know it's hard. I know it feels like giving up, but right now, making him think he's safe is the best way to ensure he ends up in prison. And what about my father? Do I pretend with him too? Especially with him. If he's complicit, we need him to feel secure. If he's just negligent, we need to figure that out before we move forward. Morrison stood. I'll be in touch within 48 hours. In the meantime, you have my direct number. If Voss threatens you again, if anything happens that makes you feel unsafe, you call me immediately. Understand? Vivian nodded. Morrison gathered her things and left, closing the office door behind her. The silence felt thick and uncomfortable. Ethan finally spoke from his corner. You did the right thing. Did I? Or did I just make everything worse? You stopped letting him win. Ethan came over, sat on the edge of his desk. That's not making it worse. That's fighting back. Morrison wants me to apologize, to go back and pretend everything's fine, that for a week, maybe 2, then it's over. He checked his phone, frowned. I need to get my daughter from school in 20 minutes. You gonna be okay? Vivian laughed bitterly. Everyone keeps asking me that. Because everyone's worried, even people who just met you. Ethan grabbed his jacket. You want my honest opinion? You're stronger than you think. Scared, yeah. But scared doesn't mean weak. Means you're smart enough to understand what you're up against. I don't feel strong. Nobody does. Strength isn't a feeling, it's a decision you make every morning to keep fighting even when you want to quit. He headed for the door, paused. My daughter, Emma. She had nightmares for 6 months after her mother died. Every night, she'd wake up screaming. Every night, I'd go to her room and tell her she was safe. And every night, she'd ask me, how do you know? You know what I told her? What? I don't know. But I'm here and I'm not leaving and we'll figure it out together. Ethan met her eyes. That's what I'm telling you now. I don't know how this ends, but I'm here and we'll figure it out together. He left. Vivian sat alone in the security office, surrounded by camera feeds showing different parts of the building. On one screen, she could see Damien in the parking garage getting into his Tesla. On another, her father in his office pouring himself a drink. On a third, Marcus and the rest of her team still working in the development lab, oblivious to everything happening above their clearance level. All these people, all these lives, all of it connected to Sterling Dynamics and the technology she'd built in secret. And now she was about to tear it all down because she'd finally gotten tired of being invisible. Vivian left the security office and took the elevator down to the parking garage. The late afternoon light was gray and weak, typical Seattle winter pressing down on everything. She sat in her car for a long time before starting the engine, trying to imagine apologizing to her father tomorrow, trying to imagine walking back into that building and pretending Damien hadn't threatened her life, trying to imagine 2 more weeks of lying when she'd spent 3 years drowning in lies. Her phone buzzed, a text from her father. We need to talk. Damien told me about your outburst. Come to the house tonight, 7 p.m. Not a request, a summons. The house was the Sterling family estate in Medina, 40 minutes away, where her father still lived alone in the place where Vivian had grown up, feeling like a stranger in her own home. She drove there on autopilot, through rush hour traffic and gathering darkness. The house sat on 2 acres of waterfront property, all modern architecture and floor-to-ceiling windows that her mother had loved before the car accident that killed her when Vivian was 12. Her father had kept everything exactly the same after that. Like maintaining the house would somehow maintain his wife's memory. Vivian used her key to let herself in. Her father was in his study, the room that smelled like leather and old books, and the specific brand of scotch he'd been drinking since before Vivian was born. He looked up when she entered, his expression disappointed in that particular way he'd perfected over 30 years of having a daughter who never quite met his expectations. Sit down, he said. She sat in the chair across from his desk, the same chair where she'd sat for dozens of lectures about responsibility, about controlling her emotions, about living up to the Sterling name despite her unfortunate weaknesses. Damien told me you quit today, Arpultul, her father said, after the presentation, in front of him, without talking to me first. I didn't quit in front of anyone. I quit in private after the defense officials left. Don't split hairs with me. You know how this looks? You know what this does to our credibility? He set down his drink hard enough that liquid sloshed over the rim. The Defense Department just agreed to a $30 million contract based on technology you helped develop, and now you're throwing a tantrum because you didn't get enough attention? I didn't help develop it. I developed it, all of it. Every line of code, every algorithm, Damien developed it. You were part of the team. There's a difference. No, I developed it. Damien presented it. There's a difference. Vivian's hands were shaking, but her voice stayed steady. For 3 years, I've watched him take credit for my work. I've watched you promote him, praise him, give him everything while I stay hidden in the basement like some dirty secret you're ashamed of. I'm not ashamed of you. Yes, you are. You've been ashamed of me since the panic attack started. Since I couldn't handle a board meeting without falling apart. Since I proved I wasn't strong enough to be Richard Sterling's daughter publicly. What? Her voice cracked. You decided I was too broken to be visible, so you made Damien the face of my own work, and her father was quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice was softer, but no less firm. I protected you. Do you understand that? I protected you from a world that would have destroyed you. Tech is vicious, Vivian. Investors are vicious. Media is vicious. They would have torn you apart the first time you showed weakness, and then all your brilliant work would have been dismissed because people couldn't see past your instability. So you decided to hide me instead. I decided to let you do what you do best in an environment where you felt safe, where you didn't have to perform or pretend or force yourself to be someone you're not. He stood, came around the desk. Damien has been your shield. He's taken the pressure, the scrutiny, the impossible demands that come with being the public face of innovation. He's protected you just as much as I have. He's blackmailed me. The words hung in the air. Her father's expression didn't change. What? Well, Damien has been blackmailing me for over a year. He has my medical records, my therapy notes, my private emails. He threatened to release everything if I ever tried to take credit for my own work. Vivian stood too, facing him across the desk. He cornered me on the rooftop Friday night. He told me I was too weak to fight him, and when I tried to stand up for myself, I nearly died. Damien would. Damien did. And you gave him the access to do it by handing over administrative credentials to someone who's been systematically destroying me. Her father's jaw tightened. That's a serious accusation. It's the truth. It's paranoia. It's your anxiety making you see threats that don't exist. He moved closer, and for a moment Vivian saw genuine concern in his eyes. Not for her safety, for her mental state. Sweetheart, you're not well. This obsession with Damien, these conspiracy theories about blackmail and theft. This is exactly what Dr. Patterson warned me about. You're spiraling. I'm not spiraling. I'm finally telling the truth. You're having a breakdown, and I should have seen it coming, should have insisted on the medical leave weeks ago. He picked up his phone. I'm calling Dr. Patterson. We're going to get you help. Right now, before this gets any worse. Dad, no. This isn't a discussion. You're clearly in crisis, and I'm not going to stand by while you destroy yourself with these delusions. Vivian's chest tightened. The familiar panic was rising, the feeling of walls closing in, of being trapped by people who claimed to love her. She could feel the old patterns trying to reassert themselves, the instinct to back down, to apologize, to agree that yes, she was unstable, yes, she needed help, yes, everyone else knew better than she did about her own life. But then she thought about Morrison's tablet full of evidence, about Ethan saying, strength is a decision you make every morning, about 63 minutes of recorded footage proving exactly what Damien was. I'm not having a breakdown, Vivian said quietly. I'm having clarity, maybe for the first time in my life. And if you can't see the difference, that says more about you than it does about me. She walked out of the study, through the house she'd grown up in, out the front door into the cold night. Behind her, she heard her father calling her name, but she didn't stop. She got in her car and drove away from the estate, away from the carefully maintained memory of a family that had never quite existed. Her phone rang multiple times. Her father, then Damien, then her father again. She didn't answer. She drove until she found herself at a park overlooking Lake Washington, empty this late on a Wednesday night. She sat on a bench in the darkness, watching boats drift across black water, and tried to figure out what the hell she was supposed to do now. Morrison had said to apologize, to buy time, to pretend everything was fine for one more week while the FBI built their case. But Vivian wasn't sure she could do that. Wasn't sure she could walk back into Sterling Dynamics tomorrow and smile at Damien and pretend Friday night hadn't happened. Wasn't sure she had that kind of strength. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "This is Emma Ryder. My dad gave me your number. He says you're having a hard day. Want to see a picture of my hamster?" Despite everything, Vivian smiled. She texted back, "Yes, please. Oui, ans, I passe pas." A photo came through immediately. A small girl with dark hair holding a fat brown hamster. Then another text. "Her name is Pancake because she's flat when she sleeps. Dad says sometimes talking to someone helps, even if they're 7 and mostly interested in hamsters. So if you want to talk, I'm here. Or if you just want more hamster pictures, I have 47 Shad." Vivian stared at her phone, this message from a child she'd never met, and felt something crack open in her chest. Not breaking. Opening. Like a door she'd kept locked for years was finally coming unstuck. She called Ethan's number. He answered on the first ring. "You okay?" "No, but I think I'm going to be." Vivian took a breath. "Thank you for the hamster pictures. Emma takes her emotional support role very seriously. She made me promise to check if you wanted to see videos too. Apparently Pancake does tricks. Your daughter is very kind. She learned it from her mother, and she's practiced on me for 2 years, so she's gotten pretty good at knowing when people need hamsters." He paused. "Where are you right now?" "Lake Washington, sitting in the dark, questioning my life choices." That's a valid Wednesday night activity. You want company, or you want to be alone? I don't know what I want. I just know I can't go back tomorrow and apologize. I can't pretend anymore. Then don't. His voice was calm. Morrison's plan was solid, but it's not the only plan. We find another way. We figure out how to keep you safe while still moving forward with the investigation. How? That's what we figure out. Tomorrow. Tonight, you go home, you get some sleep, and you stop carrying all this alone. He was quiet for a moment. Emma wants to know if you like chocolate chip cookies. She's concerned about your blood sugar. Vivian laughed, and it came out wet. Tell Emma yes. Tell her thank you. Tell her... Her voice broke. Tell her she's helping more than she knows. I'll tell her. Now go home, Vivian. Lock your doors. Don't answer if Damien or your father calls. Tomorrow, we make a new plan. She drove home through empty Seattle streets. She drove home, past buildings full of people living normal lives with normal problems. Her apartment felt different when she let herself in. Smaller somehow, like she'd outgrown it in the space of a week. She locked the door, turned on all the lights, and sat on her couch with her laptop. The FBI phone Ethan had given her sat on the coffee table, its recording of Damien's presentation waiting to be used. Beside it, her personal phone kept buzzing with messages she wasn't reading. And somewhere in her email, buried under work correspondence and automated alerts, there was probably a termination notice from Sterling Dynamics HR, because companies like that didn't let employees quit on their own terms. Vivian opened a blank document and started writing. Not code this time. A timeline. Everything that had happened, from the first time Damien had taken credit for her work to this afternoon's presentation. Every threat, every manipulation, every moment she'd been made to feel like she was the problem instead of the victim. She documented it all in careful detail, time-stamped and cross-referenced with the evidence Ethan had compiled. If Morrison's plan fell through, if the FBI investigation went nowhere, if Damien found a way to destroy the case before it went to trial, at least there would be a record. At least someone would know the truth. She worked until 3 in the morning, finally collapsing into bed fully clothed. Sleep came in fragments, nightmares about falling, about being chased through Sterling Dynamics' empty hallways, about standing in front of a courtroom trying to explain why she deserved to be believed. Thursday morning arrived gray and cold. Vivian's phone showed 37 missed calls and 23 unread messages. She ignored all of them, showered, dressed in jeans and a sweater instead of work clothes, and made coffee she couldn't drink. At 8 a.m., someone knocked on her door. She checked the peephole. Ethan stood in the hallway, 2 coffees in hand, looking like he'd slept about as much as she had. She opened the door. "You're not supposed to be here." Ditim Marslasi. I'm off duty. I can be wherever I want. He held out one of the coffees. Morrison called. She got emergency approval to move forward with the investigation. Federal agents are serving warrants at Sterling Dynamics right now. Damien's being arrested as we speak. Vivian stared at him. What? It's over. They're bringing him in for questioning, seizing his computers, his phone, his files, everything. Ethan's expression was carefully controlled, but his eyes were bright. They want you to come in for an official statement this afternoon, but the worst part is done. He can't hurt you anymore. The coffee slipped from Vivian's hand, hit the floor, splashed everywhere. She didn't notice. She was too busy trying to breathe through the sudden flood of relief and terror and something that might have been hope. My father, she managed. What about? They're questioning him too. Whether he faces charges depends on what they find. But right now, this moment, you're safe. Ethan stepped over the spilled coffee, put his hands on her shoulders. Over. You did it, Vivian. You fought back, and you won. She hadn't won. Not yet. There would be trials and testimony, and Damien's lawyers trying to destroy her credibility. There would be media attention and questions about her mental health, and people asking why she'd waited so long to come forward. There would be months, maybe years, of fighting to prove she deserved her own life. But in this moment, standing in her doorway with spilled coffee soaking into the carpet and Ethan's hands steady on her shoulders, Vivian let herself believe that maybe winning was possible after all. The FBI field office in downtown Seattle smelled like burnt coffee and the particular kind of exhaustion that came from people working cases that never really ended. Vivian sat in an interview room that was trying very hard to look less intimidating than it was. Soft gray walls, a table that wasn't bolted to the floor, chairs that almost looked comfortable. Agent Morrison sat across from her with that same neutral expression she'd worn in Ethan's office, but there was something sharper in her eyes now. Something that said the game had changed and they were playing for keeps. Before we begin the formal statement, Morrison said, I want you to understand what happened this morning. At 6 a.m., federal agents executed search warrants at Sterling Dynamics, Damien Voss's residence, and several locations associated with TechCore Industries. We seized computers, phones, financial records, and approximately 4,000 documents. Damien Voss was arrested at his home at 6:45 and is currently in custody. Vivian's hands were shaking in her lap. What did he say when they arrested him? He invoked his right to an attorney and refused to answer questions. Standard procedure for someone who knows they're in serious trouble. Morrison pulled out her tablet. But here's the interesting part. When we searched his home office, we found a safe. Inside that safe were copies of medical records, therapy notes, and private communications belonging to 17 different Sterling Dynamics employees. Not just you. 17 people he'd been collecting information on for years. The room tilted slightly. 17? He's been systematically gathering blackmail material on anyone he perceived as a threat to his position. Some of it obtained through the administrative access your father gave him. Some of it obtained through illegal hacking. Some of it stolen directly from company servers. Morrison's expression hardened. Miss Sterling, you weren't his only victim. You were just the one who fought back. Vivian tried to process that. Somewhere in Sterling Dynamics, 16 other people had been living with the same fear she'd been carrying. 16 other people who'd kept silent because Damien had found their weaknesses and weaponized them. What about my father? She asked quietly. Morrison was silent for a moment. That's complicated. We found email correspondence between your father and Damien going back 3 years. Most of it shows your father giving Damien increasing levels of access and authority. There are also emails where your father explicitly tells Damien to handle various employee situations, including yours. Does that make him complicit? It makes him negligent, at minimum. Whether it crosses into criminal conspiracy depends on how much he knew about what Damien was actually doing with that authority. Morrison leaned forward slightly. Your father is cooperating with the investigation. He's provided access to his personal files, his correspondence, his financial records. He claims he had no knowledge of the blackmail or the technology sales to TechCore, says he trusted Damien completely. He moaned. Do you believe him? I believe he's either an exceptionally careless CEO or he's lying. We're working on figuring out which. Morrison opened a new screen on her tablet. But right now, I need your formal statement. Everything we discussed yesterday, on the record, with specific dates and details. This is going to take several hours. You ready? It's... Vivian nodded. For the next 4 hours, she talked. Morrison recorded everything, occasionally stopping to ask clarifying questions or request documentation. Vivian walked through every stolen project, every threatening conversation, every moment of manipulation and control. She described the rooftop incident in excruciating detail, what Damien had said, how he'd moved, the exact moment when she'd realized he was going to let her fall. Halfway through, Morrison called in another agent to take over the questioning while she stepped out. Through the interview room's small window, Vivian could see her on the phone, pacing, her expression intense. When she came back, she looked satisfied. Damien's lawyers just tried to argue that his arrest was unlawful because we moved too fast. The judge disagreed. He's being held without bail pending arraignment. Morrison sat down again. Let's talk about the Defense Department presentation. You recorded it on the phone Mr. Ryder gave you. Walk me through what Damien said and how it differed from the actual development process. Vivian pulled out the FBI phone, queued up the recording. They listened to the entire presentation, stopping every few minutes so Vivian could explain which parts were her work and how she knew Damien was lying. By the time they finished, it was past 2 in the afternoon and Vivian's voice was starting to crack from exhaustion. Morrison finally set down her tablet. Okay, that's enough for today. We'll need you to come back for additional questioning as we analyze the seized evidence. But you've given us more than enough to move forward with charges. What kind of charges? Corporate espionage, intellectual property theft, wire fraud, blackmail, multiple counts of computer fraud and abuse. If we can prove he endangered your life on that rooftop, possibly attempted murder. Morrison stood. He's looking at 20 to 30 years minimum, more if we find additional victims, or can prove the TechCore sales were more extensive than we currently know. 20 to 30 years. Vivian tried to imagine Damien in prison for decades, tried to feel the vindication she thought she'd feel. Instead, she just felt empty, wrung out, like she'd been fighting so hard for so long that now that the fight was over, she didn't know what to do with herself. What happens now? She asked. Now you go home. You rest. You don't talk to media. And trust me, they're going to be calling. You don't talk to anyone from Sterling Dynamics, except through your attorney. Speaking of which, you need to get one. A good one. Because even though you're the victim here, Damien's legal team is going to try to paint you as unreliable and unstable. They're going to use your medical history against you. I know. Do you? Because this isn't going to be easy, Miss Sterling. You're going to have to testify in court. You're going to have to sit in a witness box and tell a room full of strangers about your anxiety disorder, your depression, your therapy sessions. Damien's lawyers are going to ask you invasive questions about your mental health and your competence. They're going to try to make the jury believe you're too unstable to be trusted. Son, let them try. Vivian stood too, steadier now. I've spent 3 years believing I was too broken to deserve my own life. I'm done believing that. If Damien's lawyers want to drag my medical history through court, fine. At least this time everyone will know why that information was supposed to be private in the first place. Morrison studied her for a moment, then nodded. Good. That's the attitude you're going to need. Mr. Ryder's waiting in the lobby for you. He's insisted on providing personal security until we're certain Damien's associates aren't a threat. Damien has associates? Don't say. We're still determining that, but until we know for sure Mr. Ryder isn't taking chances. Morrison walked her to the door. One more thing. The board at Sterling Dynamics called an emergency meeting for tomorrow morning. They've temporarily suspended operations pending the investigation. Your father has been placed on administrative leave. They want to talk to you about the future of the company. Vivian stopped. What? You're the person who actually built their most valuable technology. They know that now. They want to discuss your role moving forward. Morrison's expression was unreadable. What you do with that opportunity is up to you, but think carefully. This is your chance to take back everything that was stolen from you. The lobby was busy with agents and civilian staff moving through their Thursday afternoon. Ethan sat in a corner chair, Emma beside him doing homework on a tablet. When Emma saw Vivian, she jumped up and ran over. Dad said you had to talk to the police about bad stuff. Are you okay? Do you need more hamster pictures? I brought Pancake's whole photo album just in case. Despite everything, Vivian smiled. I'm okay. Thank you for asking. Dad also said we're going to make sure you're safe now because that's what friends do. I made you a card, but I left it in the car. It has glitter, lots of glitter. Dad says too much glitter, but I think you can never have too much glitter when you're having a hard time. Ethan came over, put a hand on Emma's shoulder. Give her some space, kiddo. She's had a long day. It's fine, Vivian said. Really, the glitter card sounds perfect. They walked out of the FBI building into weak afternoon sunlight. Emma chattered about school and Pancake's latest tricks, while Ethan stayed quiet, watchful, scanning the street like he expected threats to materialize from nowhere. They got into his car, a practical SUV with Emma's booster seat in back and evidence of family life scattered everywhere. Goldfish crackers on the floor, a forgotten sweatshirt, a library book about dinosaurs. It felt painfully normal after 4 hours in a federal interview room. Where to? Ethan asked, starting the engine. My apartment, I guess. I don't know. Nowhere feels safe right now. Then you come to our place. We have a guest room. Emma's already decided you're staying for dinner anyway. Apparently glitter cards are more effective when delivered in person. I don't want to impose. You're not imposing. You're accepting help. There's a difference. He pulled into traffic. Morrison briefed me while you were giving your statement. Damien's in custody, but his lawyers are already making noise. Until we know they're not going to try something stupid, I'd rather have you somewhere I can keep an eye on. Emma piped up from the back seat. Dad's really good at keeping people safe. He kept me safe after Mom died, even when everything was scary and sad. Now he can keep you safe too. Vivian's throat was too tight to answer. She stared out the window at Seattle sliding past, all those buildings and people and normal lives she'd been watching from the outside for so long. Somewhere in this city, Damien was sitting in a federal holding cell. Her father was probably in his empty mansion trying to figure out how his perfect protege had turned into a criminal. And 17 other Sterling Dynamics employees were maybe just now learning they'd been blackmail victims for years. They drove to a neighborhood near Green Lake, parked in front of a modest house with a yard that needed raking and a porch light that was on even though it was barely 4 in the afternoon. Inside, the house was warm and lived in, mismatched furniture, Emma's artwork on the fridge, dishes in the sink, evidence of life being actively lived rather than perfectly maintained. Guest rooms upstairs, first door on the right, Ethan said. Bathrooms across the hall. Make yourself comfortable. We usually eat around 6. Vivian went upstairs with her bag, found a small room with a comfortable bed and curtains that didn't quite match the bedspread. It was perfect. She sat on the edge of the bed and finally let herself fall apart. Not dramatically, just quietly, crying into her hands while her whole body shook with the release of 3 years of holding everything together. She didn't know how long she sat there. Eventually, there was a soft knock on the door. Come in, she managed. Emma pushed the door open, holding a card that was indeed covered in excessive amounts of glitter. I heard you crying. Dad says sometimes people need to cry, and we should let them, but I wanted to give you this just in case it helps. Vivian took the card. On the front, Emma had drawn a stick figure with wild hair standing next to a building. Inside, in careful 7-year-old handwriting, you are brave. Being brave is hard. Here is a hamster to make it better. Below that, a drawing of Pancake. Thank you, Vivian whispered. This is the best card I've ever gotten. Really? Because some of the glitter fell off, and Dad says I used too much glue. It's perfect, exactly how it is. Emma beamed. Do you want to meet Pancake for real? She lives in my room and she's really soft, and Dad says petting soft things helps when you're sad. They went to Emma's room, which was an explosion of color and chaos. Toys everywhere, books stacked in precarious towers, a hamster cage on the dresser. Emma carefully lifted Pancake out, a fat brown hamster who looked mildly offended at being disturbed, and showed Vivian how to hold her properly. See? She's very calm. Dad says she has good emotional intelligence for a hamster. Emma sat cross-legged on the floor. When Mom died, I used to hold Pancake every night before bed. It helped. Not all the way helped, but some helped. Vivian held the drowsy hamster, feeling its tiny heart beating against her palm. You must miss your mom a lot. Every day. But Dad says that's okay. He says missing people means they mattered. Emma picked at the carpet. Do you miss someone? Washing. I miss the person I thought my father was. Before I realized he was more interested in protecting his company than protecting me. That's sad. Dads are supposed to protect you for real, not just pretend protect you. Emma took Pancake back, returned her to the cage. But my dad's really good at real protecting, so you can share him if you want. I don't mind. Ethan appeared in the doorway. Emma, stop volunteering me to people. I'm not a library book. Bah, but you're good at helping and Vivian needs help, so I thought, I know what you thought. Now go wash your hands. Dinner's almost ready. He waited until Emma ran off, then looked at Vivian. Sorry. She's been through enough that she's got strong opinions about making sure people aren't alone when they're hurting. She's wonderful. She's exhausting, but yeah, also wonderful. He leaned against the doorframe. You doing okay? Real answer, not the automatic one. I don't know yet. Ask me in a week when I figure out if this is real or if I'm going to wake up and find out I imagined the whole thing. It's real, and you didn't imagine it. And tomorrow you're going to walk into Sterling Dynamics and take back what's yours. Morrison said the board wants to meet with me. I don't even know what that means. It means they know they screwed up. They let Damien steal from you and blackmail you and nearly kill you, all while your work built their entire company. Now they want to make it right. Ethan's expression was serious. What do you want to happen? Vivian thought about that. What did she want? For 3 years, she'd wanted to be invisible and safe. For 1 week, she'd wanted revenge. But what came after revenge? What did she actually want for herself? I want them to admit what happened, she said slowly. I want my name on my own work. I want every patent Damien filed under his name transferred to me. I want Sterling Dynamics to become the company it should have been if my father had actually cared about doing the right thing. That's a start. What else? Bashke. I want to run it, not hide in the development lab while someone else plays CEO. Actually run it, make the decisions, face the investors, do all the things everyone said I was too broken to handle. She met his eyes. I want to prove I was never the problem. They were. Ethan smiled. Then that's what you ask for tomorrow. No compromises. No apologizing for existing. You walk in there and you take what you built. Dinner was spaghetti that Emma had helped make, which meant the sauce had slightly too much oregano and the table was covered in Parmesan cheese. They ate in the kitchen while Emma narrated her entire school day in excruciating detail. A conflict over markers in art class, a spelling test she'd aced, something involving kickball that Vivian couldn't quite follow, but Emma clearly felt passionate about. It was so completely normal that Vivian almost forgot she was sitting in a stranger's house after spending 4 hours giving testimony that would send someone to federal prison. Almost forgot that tomorrow she had to walk into a boardroom and demand control of a billion-dollar company. Almost forgot that the last week had been the worst and strangest of her entire life. After dinner, Emma insisted Vivian watch her favorite movie with them, something animated about a girl who saved her family by being brave. Vivian sat on the couch with Emma curled against one side and Ethan on the other, and tried to remember the last time she'd felt this kind of uncomplicated comfort. She couldn't. Emma fell asleep halfway through, her head on Vivian's shoulder. Ethan carefully picked her up, carried her to bed. Vivian heard him reading a story in the other room, his voice low and patient. When he came back, he found Vivian still on the couch, staring at nothing. You should sleep, he said. Tomorrow's going to be hard. I know. I just keep thinking about my father, about how he's probably alone in that big house right now, wondering how everything went so wrong. He made choices. Now he's living with consequences. But he thought he was protecting me. He genuinely believed keeping me hidden was the right thing. Then he was wrong. Good intentions don't excuse bad actions. Ethan sat down beside her. My wife used to say something. She'd say the worst kind of harm is the kind people do while telling themselves they're being kind. Because at least if someone's cruel on purpose, you can fight back. But when they hurt you while calling it love, you end up believing you're the problem. Is that what happened to her? At her company? But something. Her boss convinced her she was too emotional to handle a promotion, said he was protecting her from stress that would overwhelm her, kept her in a junior position for 3 years while taking credit for her analysis. Then when she finally had enough evidence to expose the fraud, they made her death look like an accident. Ethan's voice was flat. So yeah, I know what it looks like when people hide abuse behind protection, and I know what it costs. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry. Just don't let your father convince you his negligence was love. And don't let anyone tell you that surviving what Damien did makes you weak. He stood. Guest room's yours as long as you need it. Door locks from the inside. I'm a light sleeper, so if anything happens during the night, I'll hear it. You think something might happen? I think Damien's lawyers are going to work fast, and people do stupid things when they're desperate. So until I know for sure you're safe, I'm not taking chances. Vivian went upstairs to the guest room, locked the door, and lay in the dark staring at the ceiling. Tomorrow she would walk into Sterling Dynamics and demand her life back. Tomorrow she would face the board that had enabled her father's failures and Damien's crimes. Tomorrow she would stop being the hidden genius and start being the person she'd always been too afraid to be. Tomorrow she would either take control of her own story or she would prove everyone right about her being too broken to handle reality. She didn't sleep much. Every time she started to drift off, she'd jerk awake with the memory of falling, of empty air beneath her, of Damien's face watching her go. At 3 a.m, she gave up and sat at the small desk in the guest room, writing out exactly what she was going to say to the board. No apologies, no disclaimers about her mental health, just the truth, delivered clearly. At 6, she heard movement in the house, Ethan making coffee, Emma's sleepy voice asking about breakfast. Normal morning sounds from a normal family doing normal things. Vivian showered, dressed in the closest thing to business clothes she had, dark jeans and a sweater that at least looked professional. When she came downstairs, Emma was eating cereal and Ethan was burning toast. You look nice, Emma said. Fancy. Thank you. I have an important meeting today. Yeah. Dad says you're going to tell people they were wrong about you. That's brave. I think you should take Pancake with you for confidence, but Dad says hamsters aren't allowed in offices. Your dad's probably right about that. Vivian accepted a cup of coffee from Ethan. But thank you for the thought. They drove to Sterling Dynamics through morning traffic. The building looked different somehow, less imposing, more like just a building instead of the fortress it had been in her mind. News vans were parked outside. Reporters, cameras. Someone had leaked the story. Stay in the car, Ethan said. I'll clear a path. No, I'm done hiding. Vivian opened her door. Let them see me. She walked through the crowd of reporters with Ethan beside her, cameras flashing, voices shouting questions. Miss Sterling, is it true Damien Voss was stealing your work? Are you pressing charges? Did your father know about the blackmail? Vivian kept her head up and her mouth shut, walking straight through the chaos into the building. The lobby was eerily quiet. Half the staff hadn't come in, probably staying home until they knew whether they still had jobs. The other half watched Vivian walk past with expressions ranging from curiosity to sympathy to outright hostility. She ignored all of it, got in the elevator, rode up to the executive floor. The boardroom was full. 12 board members, half of whom Vivian had never met. Her father sat at the far end, looking older than she'd ever seen him. Marcus from her team was there, representing employee interests. And at the head of the table sat Eleanor Chen, the board's interim chair, a woman in her 60s with steel gray hair and an expression that gave nothing away. Miss Sterling, Eleanor said. Please sit. Vivian sat. Ethan took up position by the door, arms crossed, watching everyone. Eleanor folded her hands on the table. I'll be direct. The board has been made aware of criminal charges against Damien Voss and the subsequent FBI investigation into Sterling Dynamics. We've also reviewed evidence provided by Mr. Ryder showing systematic intellectual property theft and patent fraud dating back 3 years. It appears that much of the technology we've been crediting to Mr. Voss was in fact created by you. All of it, Vivian said. Not much of it. All of it. All of it, Eleanor agreed, which puts us in a difficult position. Our company's value is built on technology created by someone who was systematically exploited and silenced. Our CEO either enabled that exploitation or was negligent enough not to notice it. And our reputation is currently being shredded in real time by media coverage of the FBI arrests. Sounds like you have a problem, Vivian said. We do, and we'd like you to help us solve it. Why would I do that, E? Eleanor leaned forward slightly. Because Sterling Dynamics is your company. Not legally, not yet, but practically. You built it. Your work created its value. Your innovations drove its growth. And despite everything that's been done to you, I suspect you don't want to see it destroyed. You don't know what I want. Then tell us. Vivian looked around the table. All these powerful people, all these executives who'd sat through presentations where Damien claimed her work and never questioned it. Her father at the end, not meeting her eyes. Marcus trying to look supportive. I want full recognition, she said clearly. Every patent currently filed under Damien's name transferred to mine. Every project properly credited, every lie corrected in public statements to investors and media. Done, Eleanor said immediately. I want the CEO position, not acting CEO, not temporary CEO. Full authority, full control, full compensation at market rate for someone running a company this size. Her father finally looked up. Vivian, you don't have the experience. I have more experience than the man you were letting run this company while he committed multiple felonies. I have more experience than you did when you started Sterling Dynamics 30 years ago. And I have something you've clearly lost, basic integrity. She didn't look away from Eleanor. Those are my terms, non-negotiable. The board members exchanged glances. Quiet conversations. Her father was shaking his head, saying something about prudent oversight and necessary guidance. Eleanor ignored him. The board needs to vote, she said. But speaking personally, Miss Sterling, I think you've more than earned the right to run the company you actually built. Anyone opposed? Silence. Even her father didn't raise his hand, just sat there, looking defeated. Then it's unanimous. Effective immediately, you are CEO of Sterling Dynamics. Eleanor stood. Welcome back, Miss Sterling, though I suppose you were never really gone, just invisible. Not anymore, Vivian said. The first thing Vivian did as CEO of Sterling Dynamics was fire 3 board members who'd known about Damien's administrative access and never questioned why he needed it. The second thing was to hold a company-wide meeting in the cafeteria because the executive conference room suddenly felt like a place where lies went to breed. 200 employees packed into the space, standing room only, everyone staring at her with expressions ranging from curiosity to outright skepticism. Marcus stood near the front, giving her a supportive nod. Jennifer from testing looked nervous. David from hardware had his arms crossed like he was waiting to be disappointed. And in the back, near the coffee station that had witnessed 1,000 quiet defeats, Ethan stood watching with Emma beside him, because apparently 7-year-olds were allowed to witness corporate revolutions if their fathers were head of security. Vivian had prepared a speech, 3 pages of carefully crafted statements about transparency and integrity and moving forward together. She left it folded in her pocket and just talked instead. Most of you don't know me, she started. I'm the person who's been working on the 4th floor for 3 years while Damien Voss presented my work as his own. I'm the person your former CEO decided was too unstable to be visible. I'm the person who almost died a week ago because I finally got tired of being treated like a problem instead of a human being. The room was completely silent. Someone's phone buzzed and they fumbled to silence it. Yesterday, federal agents arrested Damien for corporate espionage, intellectual property theft, and about a dozen other charges I can't pronounce. They also discovered he'd been collecting blackmail material on 17 employees. If you are one of those people, the FBI will contact you. You'll be offered victim support services. And Sterling Dynamics will cover any therapy costs because this company failed to protect you. She could see people looking at each other, trying to figure out if they were one of the 17. Trying to remember what secrets Damien might have known. Here's what's going to change, Vivian continued. No more administrative access without oversight. No more patents filed without verification of actual authorship. No more protecting reputation over protecting people. And no more hiding the people who actually build things while charismatic sociopaths take credit. David raised his hand. What about the Defense Department contract? Are they pulling out? No, I spoke with General Holbrook this morning. Once I explained that I actually created the threat assessment system, she was more interested than ever. Apparently, military officials prefer working with people who know what they're talking about rather than people who just present well. A ripple of laughter. Nervous, but real. Ripple. What about your father? Someone called from the back. Is he coming back? Vivian had known this question was coming, had spent all morning trying to figure out how to answer it. Richard Sterling is on permanent administrative leave. The board is determining whether criminal negligence charges are appropriate. Either way, he's done making decisions for this company. And you're ready to run it? David again. No offense, but you've been hiding in the lab for 3 years. How do we know you can actually handle the pressure? It was a fair question. Vivian had asked herself the same thing about 200 times since yesterday. You don't know? I don't know. But here's what I do know. I built the technology that made this company valuable. I created systems sophisticated enough to interest the Department of Defense. I survived 3 years of systematic abuse while still producing work that changed our industry. And I'm still standing. She paused. So maybe the question isn't whether I can handle pressure. Maybe the question is why everyone assumed I couldn't. The room stayed quiet. Then Marcus started clapping. Slowly, others joined until the entire cafeteria was applauding, and Vivian had to blink hard to keep from crying in front of 200 people who were maybe, finally, actually seeing her. After the meeting, she spent the rest of the day in what used to be Damien's office, now stripped of his personal belongings and awaiting renovation. The space felt contaminated somehow, like his presence had soaked into the walls. Vivian sat at the desk and made lists, things to fix, people to call, decisions that couldn't wait. Eleanor Chen stopped by around 3. The media wants interviews, 6 different tech publications, 2 major newspapers, and something called a podcast that I don't fully understand. Tell them no. You're going to have to talk to them eventually. This story is everywhere. Hidden genius takes over company after executives arrest. You're the angle everyone wants. I'm not an angle. I'm a person who's been through something terrible, and I'm trying to figure out how to exist afterward. Vivian looked up from her lists. Can we wait at least until Damien's arraignment? Until I know whether I have to testify? You're definitely testifying, Morrison called. Damien's lawyers are arguing he was acting under your father's orders, that Richard Sterling authorized everything and Damien was just following instructions. That's a lie. Probably, but it means this is going to trial, and you're going to be the key witness. Eleanor sat down across from her. Are you ready for that? For having your medical history dissected in court? For Damien's lawyers trying to destroy your credibility? I'm ready for people to finally know the truth, whatever that costs. Eleanor studied her for a moment. You're tougher than your father gave you credit for. Everyone's tougher than my father gave them credit for. That was always his problem. He thought protecting people meant keeping them small. Her father called that night while Vivian was back at Ethan's house, sitting on the porch with Emma teaching her the proper way to hold pancake. She almost didn't answer. Almost let it go to voicemail, like she had for every other call he'd made since Wednesday. But Emma was watching with those wide 7-year-old eyes that didn't understand why families didn't just talk to each other, so Vivian answered. Dad, I need to see you, tonight, at the house. His voice sounded strained, older. Please, Vivian, I need to explain. There's nothing to explain. You gave Damien access to everything. You let him steal my work for 3 years. You told me I was too broken to deserve visibility in my own company. I was trying to protect you. You were trying to protect yourself from having a daughter who didn't fit your image of what success should look like. Vivian watched Emma gently petting Pancake's head. I'm not coming to the house. If you want to talk, we can meet somewhere public. I'm. A long silence. Then, the coffee shop on Pine Street, tomorrow morning, 7 a.m. He hung up before she could respond. Vivian sat there holding her phone, trying to figure out if she actually wanted to hear what her father had to say, or if she was just going through motions because that's what daughters did. "Was that your dad?" Emma asked. "He sounded sad." "He is sad. But sometimes people are sad because of their own choices. My dad says that too. He says Mom made a choice to tell the truth, even though it was dangerous, and that was brave, but it also made her dead." Emma repositioned Pancake, who was trying to climb out of her hands. "I think being brave is really hard, and sometimes it makes everyone sad. You're very wise for 7. I'm almost 8. That's basically a grown-up." Ethan came out onto the porch with 2 mugs of tea. "Emma, it's bath time. Go get your stuff ready." "Such see disalt busposken." "But we're having important philosophical discussions about bravery and hamsters. You can have philosophical discussions after you wash the playground dirt out of your hair. Go." Emma handed Pancake to Vivian and ran inside. Ethan sat down on the porch steps, handed Vivian one of the mugs. "Heard you had a rough first day as CEO." "Heard from who?" "Marcus called, said you fired 3 board members and told 200 employees that their former executive was a sociopath. He seemed impressed." "I don't know what I'm doing. Everyone keeps looking at me like I have answers, and I barely know what questions I'm supposed to be asking." "That's called being in charge. Nobody knows what they're doing. Some people are just better at pretending." Ethan sipped his tea. "Morrison called me too. Damien made bail." Vivian's hand tightened around the hamster. "What? I thought—" "Judge ruled he's not a flight risk because of his ties to the community. Electronic monitoring, can't leave the state, can't contact any witnesses, but he's out." Ethan's voice was carefully neutral. "I'm telling you because I don't want you surprised if you see him around Seattle, and because I'm doubling your security detail until the trial." "You think he'd come after me?" "Dini. I think desperate people do unpredictable things, and I think he's realizing he's going to spend the next 20 years in prison unless his lawyers can destroy your testimony." He looked at her directly. "Be careful, Vivian. Lock your doors. Don't go anywhere alone. Don't trust that he's moved on just because the courts say he has to." That night, Vivian lay in the guest room staring at the ceiling and imagining Damien out there, somewhere in the city, plotting how to discredit her. The thought should have terrified her. A week ago it would have terrified her, but somehow, after everything, she just felt tired. Tired of being afraid. Tired of letting him take up space in her head. She got up, went downstairs, found Ethan still awake in the kitchen doing dishes. "Can't sleep?" he asked. "Keep thinking about the trial, about having to sit in a courtroom and explain why my anxiety disorder doesn't make me a liar. You know what you're going to say?" "The truth. That I was systematically abused by someone who weaponized my medical history to keep me silent. That having mental health struggles doesn't make me incompetent or unreliable. That the only person who should be ashamed is the one who used private medical information as blackmail." "That's good. Say exactly that." Ethan dried his hands. "Emma asked me tonight if you were going to be okay. I told her yes. Was I lying?" "I don't know yet. Ask me after the trial." "I'm asking you now." Vivian thought about that, about what okay even meant anymore. She'd spent 3 years believing okay meant being safe and hidden and small enough not to bother anyone. But maybe okay was something else. Maybe okay was being scared and doing hard things anyway. Maybe okay was surviving something terrible and deciding to keep existing despite it. "I think I'm going to be okay," she said. Eventually, with a lot of therapy and probably more hamster pictures than any reasonable person should need. Hamster pictures are underrated therapy tools. Emma's very ahead of her time. The coffee shop meeting with her father was exactly as uncomfortable as Vivian expected. He was already there when she arrived, sitting at a corner table with black coffee he wasn't drinking. He looked terrible, unshaven, tired, wearing a jacket that didn't match his shirt like he'd forgotten how to dress himself. "Thank you for coming," he said when she sat down. "I'm here. Talk. I've been meeting with FBI agents, lawyers, the board. Everyone wants to know how much I knew about what Damien was doing." He finally looked at her. "The truth is I didn't know about the blackmail or the sales to TechCore. I didn't know he was destroying people. But I knew I was giving him too much access. I knew something felt wrong, and I ignored it because he was making the company successful, and I didn't want to look too closely. That's called willful negligence, Dad. That's not protection. That's cowardice. I know that now. But when I gave him those credentials, when I told him to handle difficult employees, I genuinely thought I was helping. I thought I was creating an environment where you could create without pressure. You created an environment where I was systematically victimized and then blamed for being victimized. Vivian's voice was steady. No anger, just facts. Every time I tried to speak up, you told me I was too fragile. Every time I asked for recognition, you said I couldn't handle the attention. You spent 3 years convincing me I was the problem, while the actual problem was stealing everything I built. I was wrong. About all of it. About you, about Damien, about what protection actually means. Her father's hands were shaking around his coffee cup. I told myself I was keeping you safe, like I couldn't keep your mother safe. After she died, after I lost her because I wasn't paying attention to the brake line leak, I promised myself I'd never fail to protect you. But I failed anyway. I failed worse. Mom's death wasn't your fault. A brake line failing isn't something you could have prevented. The mechanic told me it needed maintenance. 3 times he told me, and I was too busy with work. 3, with building the company, with proving I was successful. So I ignored him. And she died because I didn't pay attention to something I should have taken seriously. Vivian had never heard this before. Never knew her father blamed himself for the accident. It explained so much. The overprotection, the fear of letting her be visible, the constant anxiety about her mental health. He'd been trying to control everything because he'd failed to control the one thing that mattered. But understanding his trauma didn't excuse what he'd done to her. I'm sorry about Mom, Vivian said quietly. And I'm sorry you've been carrying that guilt for 18 years. But you don't get to use it to justify what you did to me. You don't get to say you destroyed my career because you were traumatized. That's not how this works. I know, I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm just asking you to understand why I made the choices I made. I understand, but understanding doesn't fix anything. You still have to live with the consequences. Her father nodded slowly. The board's going to recommend criminal charges. Negligent endangerment, failure to protect employees. My lawyers think I'll get probation and community service, but my reputation's destroyed. Sterling Dynamics will always be the company I built and then failed to protect. It's not Sterling Dynamics anymore. I'm changing the name. We're becoming Vivian Technologies. New name, new direction, new commitment to actually protecting the people who build things. She stood up. You asked if I'd understand. I do. But I can't forgive you yet, maybe not ever. And I need you to accept that. I accept it. I accept all of it. He looked up at her, and for the first time in her life, Vivian saw her father cry. I'm proud of you. I know I have no right to say that. I know I failed you. But I'm proud of the person you became despite everything I did to keep you small. Vivian left without responding. Some things didn't need responses. Some things just needed to be said, and then left in coffee shops for other people to clean up. The weeks before Damien's trial were a blur of meetings, press statements, and reorganizing a company that had been built on lies. Vivian worked 16-hour days, making decisions she had no experience making, learning on the job because there was no other option. She was terrible at some of it. The investor calls where she had to project confidence she didn't feel. The media interviews where reporters tried to get her to cry about her trauma for good television. But she was good at the parts that mattered, good at the technology, good at understanding what the company needed to actually succeed. Marcus became her CTO. Jennifer took over security systems. David handled hardware infrastructure. Vivian promoted everyone who'd been doing real work while Damien took credit. And slowly Sterling Dynamics, now Vivian Technologies, started transforming into something that actually valued creation over performance. Emma visited the office twice, bringing Pancake and a travel carrier because she'd decided the CEO needed regular hamster exposure for mental health. The engineering team loved her. The board was confused. Eleanor Chen asked if there was a policy against emotional support hamsters in executive meetings. There is now, Vivian said. The policy is that Emma and Pancake are always welcome. Agent Morrison called 3 weeks before the trial with updates. Damien's lawyers are going with the mental health angle hard. They're arguing you're an unreliable witness because of your history of anxiety and depression. They've subpoenaed Dr. Patterson's records, your medication history, everything. Let them. I've spent 3 years being ashamed of my medical history. I'm done with that. Good. Because you're going to need that attitude on the stand. His lawyers are brutal. They're going to try to make you break down in court, prove you're too unstable to be trusted. Then I won't break down. It's not that simple. Yes, it is. I survived 3 years of Damien Voss. I survived my father's neglect. I survived being treated like I was too broken to deserve my own life. I can survive a few lawyers asking mean questions. The trial started on a Tuesday in November. Seattle rain beating against the courthouse windows like it was trying to get inside. Vivian wore a simple black suit and no makeup because she'd decided she was done performing for people who wanted her to look a certain way. Ethan sat in the gallery with Emma, who'd insisted on coming despite being told it would be boring. "I want to be there when you're brave," Emma had said. "Like how Dad was there for me when I was brave at Mom's funeral." Damien sat at the defense table looking smaller than Vivian remembered. Prison orange had replaced his expensive suits, electronic monitoring bracelet visible under his sleeve. His lawyers surrounded him like shields, all expensive haircuts and practiced expressions. The prosecution laid out their case methodically. Evidence of technology sales to TechCore. Bank records showing payments. Security footage of Damien accessing restricted files. Email correspondence proving he'd been systematically stealing patents. The 17 employees who'd been blackmailed, all testifying about the medical records and private information he'd used against them. Then it was Vivian's turn. She walked to the witness stand trying to remember everything Morrison had told her. Tell the truth. Don't get defensive. Answer what's asked, nothing more. Let them show who they really are. The prosecutor went first, easy questions establishing the timeline. When she'd started at Sterling Dynamics, what she'd created, how long Damien had been taking credit. Vivian answered clearly, keeping her voice steady, occasionally glancing at Emma in the gallery, who was giving her a thumbs up. Then Damien's lead attorney stood up. Gregory Walsh, 50-something, expensive suit, smile like a shark. "Miss Sterling, you've been diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder and depression, correct?" "Yes." "And you've been hospitalized for panic attacks?" "Once. For observation, years ago." "You've tried multiple medications for your conditions?" "Yes, as many people do when finding treatment that works." "But you stopped taking medication 4 months before the alleged incidents with my client. Why?" "The side effects were worse than the symptoms. My doctor and I agreed to try managing my conditions through therapy instead." "So you were unmedicated during the time you claim my client was threatening you." "I wasn't unmedicated. I was receiving treatment that didn't involve medication. There's a difference." Walsh smiled slightly. "Miss Sterling, isn't it true that untreated anxiety can cause paranoid thinking? That people with your condition sometimes perceive threats that don't exist?" The prosecutor objected. The judge sustained. Walsh rephrased, "Let me ask this differently. How do we know your accusations against my client aren't the result of your mental health struggles? How do we know you didn't misinterpret normal workplace discussions as threats because your anxiety made you see danger everywhere?" Vivian looked at Damien. He was watching her with that same cold expression he'd had on the rooftop, like she was a problem to be managed. And suddenly, she wasn't scared anymore. She was angry. "You want to know how we know?" she said. "Because I have documentation. Time-stamped files proving authorship. Security footage showing him accessing restricted records. Recorded presentations where he claims my work as his own. 17 other employees with the same story. Bank records showing technology sales to competitors." She leaned forward slightly. "My anxiety disorder didn't create that evidence. It just made me easier to intimidate into silence." "But you were silent for years. If the abuse was really happening, why didn't you report it sooner?" "Because people like you convinced me no one would believe me. Because my own father told me I was too unstable to be trusted with my own story. Because every time I tried to speak up, Someone made me feel like I was crazy for being upset about being victimized. Vivian's voice stayed calm, but her words cut. The question isn't why I waited. The question is why you think having a mental illness means I deserve to be abused. But, miss. The courtroom was completely silent. Walsh tried a few more questions, but he'd lost his momentum. Vivian answered each one clearly, calmly, letting the evidence speak for itself. When she finally stepped down, Emma was bouncing in her seat, mouthing, "You were so brave." Ethan just nodded once, steady and sure. The trial lasted 2 more weeks. More witnesses, more evidence. Damien's lawyers tried everything, arguing he'd been following orders, claiming the technology sales were authorized, suggesting the entire investigation was motivated by a mentally unstable woman's vendetta. None of it worked. The evidence was too overwhelming, the testimony too consistent. The jury deliberated for 6 hours, guilty on all counts. Damien showed no emotion when the verdict was read, just sat there staring straight ahead while the judge set sentencing for 3 weeks out. Maximum 25 years. Vivian watched from the gallery and felt nothing. No triumph, no vindication. Just a bone-deep exhaustion and the distant thought that maybe, finally, it was over. Sentencing day came in early December. The courtroom was packed. Media, Sterling Dynamics employees, the other blackmail victims. Vivian sat in front with Ethan on one side and Emma on the other. Her father was there too, sitting in the back, looking like he'd aged another 10 years. The judge asked if anyone wanted to make victim impact statements. Vivian stood. She'd written something the night before, pages of carefully constructed thoughts about harm and healing and what justice meant. She left it folded in her pocket and just talked. "Damien Voss tried to steal my life," she said. "Not just my work, my actual life. He took everything I created and claimed it as his own. He used my private medical information as a weapon to keep me silent. And when I finally tried to fight back, he cornered me on a rooftop and watched me nearly fall to my death." She could feel everyone watching her, the jury, the judge, Damien himself, still showing no emotion. But here's the thing about people like him. They only have power if you believe the lies they tell about you. They only win if you accept that your trauma makes you unreliable. Your struggles make you incompetent. Your survival makes you weak. Vivian looked directly at Damien. "I don't believe those lies anymore, and I won't let anyone else believe them either." She sat down. The judge sentenced Damien to 23 years in federal prison. Not the full 25, but close. Close enough. Outside the courthouse, media swarmed. Vivian gave one statement, brief and clear. This case was never about revenge. It was about the right to be believed when you tell the truth about abuse. About the right to exist as a whole person, rather than just the parts other people find convenient. I hope everyone watching understands that having mental health struggles doesn't make you a liar. It just makes you someone who's been through something hard and survived. 3 months later, Vivian Technologies launched its first product under her leadership, an AI system designed specifically to detect workplace harassment and document evidence for victims. It wasn't the kind of innovation that made billions, but it was the kind that might keep other people from going through what she'd gone through. That felt more important than profit margins. Her father pleaded guilty to criminal negligence and got 2 years probation plus community service. They saw each other occasionally, awkward lunches where they talked about weather, and avoided everything that mattered. Vivian didn't know if they'd ever get past what he'd done. Maybe forgiveness wasn't the point. Maybe the point was just acknowledging that some relationships break and stay broken, and that's okay too. Emma turned 8 in March. Vivian came to the birthday party with a gift-wrapped box containing the most elaborate hamster habitat money could buy, complete with tubes and wheels and a tiny castle. "This is the best present ever," Emma declared. "Pancake's going to be so fancy." She deserves it. She's provided crucial emotional support during a difficult time. Emma hugged her hard. "Dad says you're not living with us anymore because you're ready to be alone again. Are you ready?" "I think so, but I'm going to miss having hamster access. You can visit any time. Pancake has office hours. Dad says you should make appointments, but I say friends don't need appointments." Vivian looked at Ethan over Emma's head. He was watching with that same calm expression he'd had the first night he'd pulled her from death. Like he'd known all along she'd be okay. Like he'd never doubted it. Later, After cake and too much sugar, Ethan walked Vivian to her car. Emma's right, he said. You don't need appointments. You're family now. Comes with the territory of sharing hamster therapy. Thank you for everything, for saving my life, for believing me, for letting your daughter drag me back to functional humanity through aggressive hamster exposure. Emma's therapeutic methods are unconventional but effective. He leaned against her car. You doing okay? Real answer. I'm still figuring out what okay means, but I'm building a company that values creation over performance. I'm in therapy that's actually helping. I'm making decisions about my own life instead of letting other people make them for me. She smiled slightly. And I'm learning that surviving something terrible doesn't make you broken. It just makes you someone who survived. 6 months after that, Vivian stood in her office, actually her office now, renovated and personal, and nothing like the space Damien had occupied, looking out over Seattle. Rain on the windows, city lights reflecting off wet streets. The same view she'd been staring at for years, but different somehow. More real, less like she was watching life from behind glass. Her phone buzzed, a message from a number she didn't recognize. This is Damien. I'm allowed 1 phone call a month. I wanted to tell you that you'll never be more than what I made you. Without me, Sterling Dynamics would never have succeeded. You're just the code monkey who got lucky. Vivian stared at the message for a long moment. A week ago, even a month ago, those words would have cut deep. Would have made her question whether she really deserved everything she'd fought for. Would have made her wonder if Damien had been right all along about her being too weak to handle visibility. But standing in her office overlooking the city that had witnessed her almost dying and her decision to live anyway, Vivian just felt tired. Tired of giving Damien space in her head. Tired of letting his opinion matter. She blocked the number without responding and went back to work. Because here's what she'd learned, slowly and painfully, over 6 months of rebuilding herself and her company. The people who need you to be small will always find reasons why you should stay that way. They'll use your trauma, your struggles, your private pain as proof that you can't handle more. They'll call it protection while actually building a prison. And if you let them, they'll convince you the prison is safety. But prison isn't safety. It's just another kind of death. Real safety is being able to exist fully, struggles and strengths, trauma and triumph, broken pieces and healing, without someone deciding which parts of you deserve visibility. Real safety is understanding that surviving something terrible makes you a survivor, not a victim waiting to be saved. Real safety is knowing that people who love you will support your growth instead of managing your smallness. Vivian had spent 30 years believing she was too fragile for the world. Turned out the world was just full of people who benefited from her believing that. Once she stopped believing, once she decided she deserved to take up space regardless of who was comfortable with it, everything changed. Not easily. Not perfectly. Not in some smooth transformation where trauma disappeared and confidence appeared like magic, but gradually, painfully, one small decision at a time to stop letting other people write her story. She'd almost died on a rooftop in the rain, but she hadn't died. She'd survived, and more importantly, she'd decided that surviving wasn't the end of her story. It was just the part where she finally stopped being invisible. Emma texted that night, "Dad says you're thinking big thoughts. Do you need pancake pictures? I have new ones from today's photo shoot. She's wearing a tiny hat." Vivian smiled at her phone. At this 7-year-old turned 8, who understood that sometimes the only thing between you and darkness was someone offering you pictures of a hamster in a hat. "Yes, please," she texted back. Always yes. The pictures came through, Pancake looking vaguely offended in various tiny costumes. And Vivian sat in her apartment that was finally starting to feel like home rather than just a place she hid, and she laughed, really laughed, for the first time in longer than she could remember. Because that's the thing about surviving. It doesn't mean you suddenly become fearless or perfect or unburdened. It just means you keep existing despite everything. You keep building things and making choices and deciding that your life belongs to you regardless of who tried to take it away. Damien was in federal prison. Her father was slowly accepting the consequences of his negligence. Sterling Dynamics was becoming Vivian Technologies and actually living up to the values it claimed to represent. And Vivian herself was standing in a rain-soaked city at the helm of the empire she'd built in secret, finally visible, finally real, finally refusing to apologize for taking up space. Some nights she still had nightmares about falling, Some days she still felt the weight of 3 years spent being small and quiet and hidden. Some moments she still heard Damien's voice telling her she was too weak to handle reality. But those moments were getting quieter, and the voice she heard most clearly now was her own, steady and certain, saying the things she'd needed to hear for 3 years. You were never the problem. You were just surrounded by people who needed you to think you were. Outside her windows, Seattle glittered in the rain. Inside, Vivian stood alone in the apartment she'd chosen, in the life she'd fought for, in the skin of the person she'd decided to be. And for the first time in a very long time, she felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. Not because someone had placed her there, not because someone had decided she was finally strong enough or stable enough or acceptable enough, but because she'd placed herself there, because she'd decided she deserved to exist fully, messy and complicated and imperfect, because she'd learned the hardest lesson of all, that the people who love you don't need you to be perfect. They just need you to be real. And real means all of it, the struggle and the strength, the fear and the fighting, the falling and the getting back up. Vivian had fallen, but she'd gotten back up. And now, standing in her own life on her own terms, she was finally ready to see what came next. Whatever it was, she'd face it herself. Not hidden, not small, not apologizing for existing. Just Vivian Sterling, CEO, creator, survivor. Finally, completely, unapologetically visible.